Election night headline at this hour, more trouble for Bob Dole, this time in the Midwest. The polls have just closed in 3 more states. Let's look them over. With these states added up, by the way, Clinton will have 58 electoral votes. 270 needed to win. With these states in, he will have 58 electoral votes, including Florida. Bob Dole so far has picked up no electoral votes. Now, Ohio, 21 big electoral votes. Bill Clinton carries Ohio again this time as he did the last time. Bob Dole was hoping against hope he could get Ohio. It is not to be. West Virginia, almost heaven if you believe in Clinton and Gore, because once again, West Virginia's 5 electoral votes have gone to the Clinton-Gore ticket. Now, with our earlier calls, Florida, 25 big electoral votes. This is a pickup over 1992. In 1992, George Bush carried Florida. In 1996, Bill Clinton carries Florida. A very big win for Clinton. Doesn't mean he's elected, but it is a hit to the absolute magazine of Dole's hopes of building a strong enough southern base where he can pick up the western states and win the election. Florida goes to Clinton. New Hampshire, 4 electoral votes, falls for Bill Clinton. Vermont, 3 electoral votes, also to Clinton. Now, this leaves us with 270 electoral votes needed to win. Bill Clinton has a total of 58. Bob Dole has 0. Dole's big hope right now in the South may be in the state of Georgia. Let's take a look at how things stand in Georgia at this hour. This is with very few of the precincts actually in and reporting, but it's running along the lines of Clinton 48, Dole 44%. We will see if that holds. There's some indications that Clinton may not be able to hold Georgia, but we'll see as the time goes along. Now, the polls have just closed in 2 states with Senate races. Let's look them over. West Virginia Senate seat. Solid Democratic Jay Rockefeller seeking a 3rd term. He gets it. Now, in earlier calls in the race to see who controls the United States Senate, South Carolina's longtime Senator Strom Thurmond gets his 7th term there. In New Hampshire, turnover in New Hampshire for the Democrats. Senator Bob Smith, the Republican, seeking a 2nd term, goes down to defeat. Dick Sweat, a former 2-term U.S. representative, has won the New Hampshire Senate seat. That's a pickup for the Democrats. Kentucky Senate, a hold-on for the Republicans. Senator Mitch McConnell beats back the challenge of Lieutenant Governor Steve Beshear and therefore holds on to this seat for the GOP. That makes our map for the Senate seats look as follows. Remember, 34 seats up for grabs tonight. The Democrats have to win 18 on the night of the 34 in order to get control of the Senate. So far tonight, the Democrats have picked up 2, and the Republicans have picked up 2. The Republicans have won South Carolina and Kentucky in the Senate races. Now, Ohio and history are going against Bob Dole at this hour. This could be a pivotal part of the presidential election story tonight when we get Ohio falling in line for Bill Clinton. Ed Bradley?
Well, it's in there for Bill Clinton, and the reason, as we've seen in much of the country, is the economy, the pocketbook issues coming through once again. You take a look at the voters and how they feel in Ohio. Those who thought that the economy and jobs were the number one issue, President Clinton picked up 60% of those voters. Those who, the second most important issue was Medicare and Social Security. He picked up 65% of those voters. And also in a state where you had a very popular Republican governor who was elected with 72% of the vote in the last election campaign, 52% of the people approve of the job he is doing, but President Clinton got 40% of those who like the governor. He's winning among the young voters, among senior citizens, middle class, moderates, people who think the economy is good, people who think the economy is not good. He's winning everywhere. And keep in mind that no Republican has ever won the presidency without winning Ohio.
Thanks, Ed. Let's talk about the Senate races. Bob, what about that very important race in North Carolina? I say very important race because Jesse Helms was seeking to return as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee there.
Well, he always has a close race. This is a rematch with Harvey Gantt, the same person he ran against the last time, and it is far too early to call this one. It's just too close to call at this point. But look at this, Dan. Jim Andrews, who is Harvey Gantt's campaign manager, when we were down there, told us that if this race just develops as a referendum on tobacco policy, Jesse Helms will beat us handily. And look at that, 70% of the people who thought tobacco was the most important issue voted for Jesse Helms. The hope that Harvey Gantt had to unseat Jesse Helms was that he could get a majority of the new voters who moved into the state. There have been 700,000 new voters that have moved to North Carolina since the last time that Jesse Helms was elected. They're very conservative, but the question was going to be, are they Jesse Helms kind of conservatives? Well, according to our exit polls, 45% of them did favor Jesse Helms tonight. Gant got more than half of them, but I must say, I think Gant is going to have to do better than that among the new voters if he's going to beat Jesse Helms. I know he was hoping to get a larger vote amongst the new voters.
And Helms' strength is particularly strong in the rural areas, and those votes tend to come in a little later than the others, of course. Let me show you very quickly what we have on our map. In the race for the presidency, 270 electoral votes needed to win. President Clinton has 58. That includes a pickup in Florida, which is to say he didn't carry Florida the last time, he did this time. He's also carried Vermont and New Hampshire. He has also carried West Virginia, and he's also carried Ohio. Now, the states in white are where the polls have closed, but we do not yet have enough results to say how they're going to go in the presidential race. In the Senate race, this is the way it shapes up. 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats have won 2. The Republicans have won 2. The Democrats need to win 18 if they're to regain control of the United States Senate. The Republicans have won in South Carolina and in Kentucky. The Democrats have won in West Virginia and New Hampshire. Paul is on the governor's desk. Results so far.
Another incumbent re-elected tonight. This one in North Carolina, where Jim Hunt, according to CBS News estimates, has been elected to his 4th term in one of the most expensive and nastiest campaigns of the season. It is interesting to note that Jim Hunt ran against Jesse Helms in a bitter Senate battle 12 years ago. And our exit polls tonight show us that 1 in 5 voters in North Carolina today voted for both. A vote for the Democratic governor and a vote for the conservative Senate candidate, Dan.
Thanks, Paula. Let me show you on our map in Virginia, which is a state that generally votes Republican. In the presidential race, we don't have enough in Virginia to say that Dole or Clinton has won, but Dole has a large lead in Virginia. In the Senate race in Virginia, the United States Senate race there, this is the way it looks. John Warner, as expected, beating Mark No Relation Warner, the Democratic challenger. Linda Douglas has been following the money on the campaign trail. Linda, what about big labor? Enough to say so far that they've gotten their money's worth, or too early?
Well, it's probably too early, but the labor union's impact on this race may indeed be historic. We'll have to see how it all turns out. But labor unions, of course, have traditionally worked for Democrats, but in recent campaigns, the Republicans have called the labor union sort of a paper tiger, but this was clearly the year that the tiger roared. The AFL-CIO spent $35 million on a so-called nonpartisan educational campaign that was in fact aimed at defeating at least 30 Republican congressmen all around the country. Some of those congressmen were pounded for more than a year by the labor union ads that accused them of trying to cut Medicare, trying to cut education. You were just talking about Ohio. In Ohio, 3 of the Republican congressmen had the labor unions spending $1 million apiece against them, and the Republicans poured in their millions of dollars to counter the labor ads, calling them labor bosses. So it's hard to say which of the ad campaigns would affect the voters in the final analysis, but if the Democrats take the House of Representatives, they will owe a big debt of gratitude to the labor unions, and if the Republicans, on the other hand, hang on to the House, the labor unions are not going to be facing friendly faces in Washington. Dan?
Thank you very much, Linda. And fair to say that where the unions tried to have their biggest influence was, A, in defeating the freshman Republican House members, those who were facing up for re-election the first time. That's where labor really put its emphasis. And with us now is John Sweeney, president of the AFL-CIO. Mr. Sweeney, do you have information on how the race for control of the House is going? Ours is that it's way too early to say. If you had to guess, how do you guess?
Well, I think it is too early to say, but I think that we're going to elect a number of candidates who have identified with working family issues, and that's what this campaign was all about.
Now, you poured at least $30 million into the Democratic campaigns. What do you expect to get for your money?
Well, we hope that we'll get a Congress that will be responsive to America's working families and not be dealing with a radical contract for America.
If there was one Republican that you wanted to defeat, really defeat this year, the AFL-CIO, whom would that be?
Oh, I would rather not identify any individuals, but I hope that we can have a Congress that we can hold accountable on the issues that our members and working families are so concerned about, and those are the broad issues that we have identified during this campaign, and I believe that we're going to see a more responsive Congress on those issues.
Was there not one single Republican candidate worthy of being backed by union labor this year?
Oh, there were a number of Republican candidates who were backed by labor unions in their particular area. In some of the moderate Republicans' districts, the labor movement was split, and local unions were supporting Republican candidates.
Now, the Republicans say that union labor is just another special interest, just another one of the, quote, Democratic bosses. Pretty hard to argue with that.
Well, if representing working families in this country is a special interest, I'm happy to be a part of it.
Now, President Clinton has had pretty good luck moving to the right. Do you approve of that?
I think the president has been very responsive on the issues that workers are interested in, and I believe that he is a pro-worker president.
Mr. John Sweeney, president of the AFL-CIO, who's brought labor back big time as an influence in election campaigns, thanks for being with us. Let's go to our cyber set now, and CBS News correspondent Harry Smith. Harry, what do people think about all that money spent on campaigns? Is it worth it?
Well, I'll tell you what, they are not happy about this money being spent. Of course, you've been talking about money spent on congressional campaigns. We asked folks today about spending millions and millions, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on the presidential campaign. This is actually a poll that we did about a week or so ago, and take a look at this. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the presidential campaign. Do folks around America think it's worth it? Absolutely not. Both parties have spent a lot of lip service saying we're going to campaign reform, finance reform, and everything else, but do they do it? No. They ought to look at some of these poll numbers. Here's another one that we found particularly interesting, Dan. Through the conventions this summer, through the free TV time, through the paid TV time, through C-SPAN and newspapers and the evening news every night, have you learned anything from the campaign over the last couple of months? And the answer, 3-1, is absolutely not. Dan?
Thanks, Harry. Here's the way our CBS News Electoral College map looks. 58 electoral votes for Bill Clinton, including Florida, 0 for Dole so far, 270 electoral votes needed to win. The states of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, and Indiana, too close to call in the presidential election. The Electoral College vote. Let me show you what's going to happen at 8 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, we have 17 states plus the District of Columbia. They are going to come up, all of these states. That'll be at 8 o'clock, 17 states, the District of Columbia, over 200 electoral votes at stake when we come to the top of the hour. That's why we remind you to stick in here. Now, we have the following states, Florida, New Hampshire, Vermont, West Virginia, they have fallen to President Clinton. However, when the top of this next hour, all of these states with some 200 electoral votes are going to fall. Will this be the hour of decision? Will this be the hour when you can say President Clinton has been reelected or not? That's the reason we want you to stay in here and stay tuned with us. Our CBS News coverage will be right back. Let's very quickly review the map again. I made a mistake a moment ago. You have to keep in mind, folks, that in previous election nights, I was sort of flying the rough equivalent of a biplane, you know, one of those things they spray crops with. Now, this is like the cockpit of an F-18. The risk of high technology. Let me push again and show you the states that are going to be coming up in the next hour. Over 200 electoral votes will be decided there. I apologize for the mistake earlier in pushing the wrong button, but those are the risks of high technology. In the days when we had just 2 tin cans and a piece of string, we didn't make those kind of mistakes. In political advertising, it's always prime time for the fight against crime, and they rarely make any mistakes in trying to push the right hot button in voters' concerns about crime. This time, anti-crime ads have entered a whole new dimension. 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace has been looking into all this. Mike?
Dan, as you said, crime is always a hot button issue, but what was different this year was that the politicians began to use their ads to air endorsements from crime victims. For instance, here's a Clinton ad that grew out of a notorious murder case out in California.
My daughter Polly was only 12 years old. She had her whole life in front of her.
Polly Klaas, murdered in Petaluma, California. Her father endorsed the president.
I hear people question the president's character and integrity. It's just politics. When it came to protecting children, the president had the courage to make a difference.
Fact is, federal crime legislation signed by the president had nothing to do with that California murder case. And some folks wondered, what did the father of Polly Klaas know about Bill Clinton's character?
It was over in a moment.
And then, this from crime victim Jim Brady.
President Clinton stood up and helped pass the Brady bill.
The president was endorsed by Reagan Press Secretary Jim Brady after the Brady handgun bill became law. The Clinton campaign said this was a legitimate commercial because the president was for the Brady bill and Bob Dole was against it. But that commercial was pulled off the air, Dan, after Nancy Reagan called the White House twice to complain about it. Mrs. Reagan said that she didn't like having to see again and again and again those traumatic pictures of her husband being shot. And you know, Dan, I think she had a point.
Mike Wallace, thanks. I want to show you the map. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Bill Clinton has sewn up 58 electoral votes so far. Bob Dole, none. As you can see, the states in white are the ones where the polls are closed, but the results in the presidential race are not yet known. Now, coming up at 8 o'clock, all these states in the gold will have polls closing. Note that that includes Texas, Illinois, some huge ones, almost 200 electoral votes there. Now, important in this whole election, as we go through the evening, is what has been the influence or lack of influence of the self-described Christian conservatives, quote unquote. Harry Smith is at our cyber set. Harry, what has been the influence of these people so far on the basis of what we can tell?
Well, it's very interesting, Dan, because we know that Christian conservatives have an awful lot of power within the Republican Party, but across the country, Christian conservatives only make up about 17% of the electorate. And we've been talking to you about the mood of the country thus far, and people are pretty buoyant. They like the way the economy has performed thus far. 60,000 people we talked to today in exit polls. We asked the Christian conservatives, do you think the country's on the right track? They say absolutely not. That's almost 2 to 1 of the Christian conservatives we talked to saying they don't like the job Bill Clinton has done thus far. They don't even like the job that he's done thus far with the economy. So the Christian conservatives have a big gripe on this election day. Dan?
Thanks. Joining us now from Virginia Beach is the Reverend Pat Robertson. Reverend Robertson, thanks for being with us tonight. A few weeks ago, you said, it, and I quote, it would take a miracle for Bob Dole to win. You're the expert. See anything on the horizon tonight?
I don't see it. Later on in my program, after the first debate, I said it was going to be a blowout, and I think, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing here. But the good news, as far as the conservatives is, it looks like there's going to be a pickup of as many as 3 to even 4 seats in the Senate, and possibly 1 or more in the House, and that's unprecedented. I think it's 68 years since the Republicans have done such a thing.
Well, let me remind everybody that the polls are still open in a lot of places. I'll show you here on our map. All of those states in the gray or black are where states, polls are still open. You have time to vote, and some of them you'll have to hurry, but you do have time to vote. Reverend Robinson, 2 years ago, the word among the insiders, and I quote now, the Christian coalition can flat out deliver votes. It looks like a very different picture here in 1996.
Well, not really, Dan. I think the coalition has been the firewall between winning and losing as far as conservatives in the House. The freshman class of Republicans were supposed to be an endangered species. Most of them are being reelected. So with a few cases like Bob Smith, which I'm sorry to see defeated in New Hampshire, we're looking at maybe a pickup of 4 seats in the South, and that's a primarily evangelical area of the country. It's we're looking at Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, and Clinton's home state of Arkansas. Tim Hutchinson looks like he's going to win tonight.
Reverend, abortion, school prayer, same-sex marriage, all of these are issues very important to you, but they became almost invisible and not heard of on the campaign. Why was that?
Well, I think that Dole's advisors, he's got the same group in a sense that were advising Bush in '92. They studiously avoided television advertising which pointed to the moral dilemma in our country. And consequently, he never did mobilize his base. You know, Bush won 83% of the evangelicals in 1988, and he won handily over Dukakis. But they muted those issues in '92. They muted them again in '96, and they lost. And they will lose every time that a national candidate does not address these things. If they play into the economy when the economy was as good as it is now, they're making a dreadful mistake. And I think that's what we tried to convey to the Dole campaign, and they just wouldn't listen to us.
Thank you very much, Pat Robertson. Good to be with you again. Let's take a look at our Senate map. 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats need to win 18 if they're to regain control of the Senate. So far, they've picked up 2. The Republicans have picked up 2. We don't know much about how the outcome of the House races. It's going to be a while before we know that. We are reminding you that we're watching those House races, all of them all across the country, very, very carefully. Joining us again, our political analyst, Kevin Phillips. Kevin, what about the influence of the, quote, Christian right?
Well, I think it's very substantial, and I think it was quite revealing that Pat Robertson was talking with great pride about the apparent pickups the Republicans are making in the Senate, in the South, in areas where you just know those new senators are going to be supporting the Christian coalition. We're looking at an election in which we may get a new term, the Southernization of the Republican Party. It was true somewhat in the House in the last Congress. It looks to me it's going to be more true in the Senate. So there's a lot of reason for Pat Robertson to be smiling about that.
Kevin Phillips, of all the returns you've seen tonight, which one surprised you the most?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a schizophrenia in the electoral map. We're seeing a trend in the South akin to what he talked about, which is the most pro-Republican. We're seeing what looks like it's going to be a sort of landslide-level Democratic support base in the North, in the Frost Belt. And adding this up, which we'll have to do over the course of the evening, is going to produce a new and interesting political map, and I think a sort of modified landslide for Bill Clinton.
Thanks, Kevin Phillips. Let's show you the CBS News presidential election map. As I say, stay with us as we continue to monitor returns on election night. This is the way the Senate map looks nationally. Bob Dole off to a poor start in that he's lost Florida. Stay with this CBS station. More on the hour.
CBS election coverage is brought to you by Wells Federal Bank, serving southern Minnesota families from 8 convenient locations, and by Gene Thorne, providing flexible staffing solutions for today's workplace.
Well, good evening. I'm Tom Schultz, and thanks for joining us on News 12 coverage of Decision 96. It's our pleasure to be bringing you updated local election coverage when we do cut away from CBS network coverage here on KEYC television. Again, it's my pleasure to inform you that joining us tonight will be analyst Representative Don Ostrom of St. Peter and former state representative and state senator Mark People of Mankato. Join us 1 hour from now when those two analysts will join us for our coverage of Minnesota local election coverage. I'll remind you the polls in Minnesota remain open until 8 o'clock. If you haven't voted, please think about doing so. Polls in Iowa remain open until 9 o'clock tonight. So for our viewers down in Iowa, you've got a couple of hours yet to vote and make your decision for 1996. Again, we will be bringing analysis and coverage of local races extending from the Mankato area all the way down into northern Iowa. And again, it'll be our pleasure 1 hour from now to be joined by analysts Mark People and Don Ostrom. As for right now, we're going to take a look at some of the coverage CBS News is providing on the race, a little analysis of the presidential race, and some of the support President Clinton is getting from the so-called Midwestern suburban soccer moms, a story on that, and then a little look at some fond memories from campaigns past throughout the United States and presidential campaigns. That's reported by Nanette Hansen, and we'd like to invite you again to join us 1 hour from now when we're joined by analysts Don Ostrom and Mark People. For right now, we'll join CBS coverage with Nanette Hansen and a look at some of the CBS national stories.
From CBS News Campaign 96 headquarters in New York, I'm Nanette Hansen. Campaign 96 may well be remembered as the birthplace of a new demographic, the soccer mom. WBBM TV political reporter Mike Flannery reports from a soccer field near Chicago.
Move in! Come on! Kathy Korkos has no problem picking an Oak Park youth soccer team to support. She cheers her kids. But she calls the choice for president a toughie. She's backing Bill Clinton without much enthusiasm, a view shared by others on the soccer sideline.
some of the Democratic platforms are there to support and level it out for those that don't have as much.
I don't think we're doing great for, you know, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, but I think a Democratic president is better than a Republican president, and that things would be worse if he wasn't in the White House.
They may not be happy about it, but some groups of women voters, such as Midwestern conservatives, who in 1992 gave Clinton only 20%, give him 52% now. In 92, only 40% of Midwestern mothers backed him. It is 67% now. In 92, just 39% of suburban white women backed Clinton. 57% do now in 1996, all according to an analysis for Time magazine. Bob Dole continues to express frustration that Clinton seems untouched by scandal. Part of the answer lies with women such as Maureen Cahill. A busy West suburban working mom with 2 young sons, she is cynical about political image-making and is not put off by allegations about the president's private life.
I don't necessarily agree with all the personal choices, but my concern is what he can do for the country and what he can do for my family. And I think he's better equipped to do that than Bob Dole is.
Mike Flannery for CBS News.
Some campaign traditions fade with the times, but there's one political art form collectors will pay almost any price for. WBZ TV reporter Virginia Cha reports from Boston.
This was the 1960 presidential campaign. With Kennedy, it's a time for greatness.
And on the convention floor in 1960, everybody knew it. The message was right there on Kennedy's campaign posters. Campaign memorabilia from Wilson to Wilkie, Taft to Truman, Roosevelt to Reagan give us a fascinating look at how our political process has changed. And few have a collection as extensive as Professor Richard Fries of Bentley College.
Eisenhower was a personal favorite of mine.
He was the favorite of a nation. Everybody liked Ike. But this is Fries's pride and joy.
This is an extremely scarce window poster dating back to 1864.
That's when Republican Lincoln ran with Democrat Johnson on a Union ticket. It's a treasured piece of history that Fries actually found in a barn and bought for $100.
So far, but in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, Bill Clinton wins it again and takes 23 electoral votes. Out in the prairie state of Illinois, Bill Clinton again. Illinois voted Democratic in 1992. It does so again this time. Michigan, the Wolverine state where Bob Dole once thought he had a real good chance to begin turning it around. Not to be. Michigan again goes for President Clinton. New Jersey, the Garden State is garden indeed for Bill Clinton and Al Gore. It was another state at one time the Republicans believed they could carry. It didn't happen. They also lose their Senate race there, but more about that later. In Massachusetts, 12 electoral votes in the Commonwealth. Bill Clinton, perhaps one of the least unexpected turns of the night, Bill Clinton carries Massachusetts in the presidential race. The Democrats also won the Senate race there. In Missouri, 11 electoral votes in the Show Me State. Bill Clinton also carries that. In Tennessee, out in volunteer state country and the home state of Vice President Gore, 11 electoral votes go to the Clinton-Gore ticket. Maryland, 10 electoral votes. Pretty quiet in Maryland this year. Clinton was expected to win in Maryland, and he does so, picks up another 10 electoral votes. But in Alabama, in the Yellowhammer State, President Clinton loses it. 9 electoral votes go there to Bob Dole. In Connecticut, nutmeg state voters go to Bill Clinton, 8 electoral votes. It also voted Democratic in 1992. Out in Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner for Bob Dole. He carries the 8 electoral votes in Oklahoma. In Kansas, home state of the Republican nominee, in Kansas, 6 electoral votes also go to Bob Dole. In Maine, we got a little behind on our graphics there, but no harm. That's the way it goes when you're doing live television. 4 electoral votes go to Bill Clinton. Maine also voted Democratic in 1992. A big northeastern block of votes building for Bill Clinton. In Delaware, 3 electoral votes. The Ocean State also goes for Bill Clinton. District of Columbia, the least surprising return of the evening. President Clinton and Vice President Gore carry the District of Columbia, and it's 3 electoral votes. That makes our Electoral College map look as follows. 270 needed to win. Bill Clinton has 198. Now, just at 8 o'clock, the polls closed in 13 states with Senate races. This could be the hour that decides whether the Republicans are going to hold on to the Senate or not. In the Texas Senate race, Senator Phil Gramm seeking a 3rd term. He gets it, beating back high school teacher and well-known pickup truck driver Victor Morales and beating him rather badly. In Illinois, This is for the seat of the retiring Democratic Senator Paul Simon. Our CBS News estimate is when all the votes are in and counted, Representative Dick Durbin, the U.S. representative there, will hold on to this seat for the Democrats in Illinois. In Michigan, Senator Carl Levin, seeking a fourth term, he will get it, having beaten back former radio talk show host Ronna Romney. And in the New Jersey Senate race, one of the dirtiest, nastiest, muck-slinging races in all of the states this time, Representative Bob Torricelli, in Congress since 1982, has beaten back the challenge of Representative Dick Zimmer. There are a lot of people in New Jersey who thought neither one of these people deserved to win after the races they conducted, but somebody had to win, and Bob Torricelli, the Democrat, wins it. That's for the seat that Bill Bradley was giving up. In Massachusetts, Senator John Kerry, the Democrat, seeking a third term. A whale of a fight. This was perhaps the cleanest Senate race, not only this election year, but one of the cleanest in years. He has beaten back the challenge of very popular Republican Governor William Weld. Kerry's Massachusetts holds on to a Democratic Senate seat there. In Tennessee, Senator Fred Thompson seeking his first full term. He gets it. You remember Thompson is a one-time movie actor, among other things. A lot of people think he could be a presidential possibility in the year 2000. He wins a solid Republican seat, holds on to it in Tennessee. Oklahoma, Senator James Inhofe, seeking his first full term, gets it, having beaten political scientist Jim Boren. That's a hold on for the Republicans of Oklahoma. Mississippi, down in the Delta, Senator Thad Cochran seeking his fourth term. Thad Cochran, perhaps the most popular Republican in the South, along with Trent Lott and Newt Gingrich. He gets his fourth term. That's a hold on for the Republicans. Now, Kansas has two seats up this time. One, the first one, Nancy Castlebaum, retiring from the Senate. Representative Pat Roberts, the Republican in Congress since 1981, holds on to that seat for the Republicans. We don't have enough information on the other Senate seat in Kansas to call it yet. In the Delaware Senate race, Senator Joe Biden, a fifth term for Joe Biden. Biden has been an on and off supporter of President Clinton. He holds on to this Democratic seat in Delaware. Now, in an earlier race, North Carolina Senate, Senator Jesse Helms, seeking his fifth term, has beaten back Harvey Gantt there. So this is the way the map, when it comes to the Senate races, looks. 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats have to win 18 in order to get control of the Senate. They've won 8. The Republicans have won 8. And here we are. Hold on. Max Cleland, the Democrat, badly wounded Vietnam veteran. Our CBS News estimate is that when all the votes are in and counted, Max Cleland will have held on to a Democratic Senate seat in Georgia. This, folks, pause and mark it, is big for the Democrats because a lot of the Republicans felt that their man Guy Milner, the businessman, was coming on so strong at the end that they would beat Max Cleland. Didn't happen. Sam Nunn, the veteran and well-respected Democratic senator from Georgia, is retiring. Max Cleland will take his place. That's a hold on for the Democrats. Well, Ed Bradley, in the presidential race, did the so-called gender gap help the president? I get the feeling that women voted for President Clinton in pretty large numbers.
Oh, big time, Dan. President Clinton started this campaign to exploit his advantage among women. He wanted to increase that so-called gender gap. He did a number of small but significant things. Small because they didn't cost much money, significant because they were important to women. He sponsored the Violence Against Women Act, which made stalking and domestic abuse federal crimes. He signed legislation banning the so-called drive-by deliveries, legislation that would permit women to stay in the hospital for 48 hours after they gave birth. He earmarked $30 million for research into a genetic basis of breast cancer, and he said that the post offices must display pictures of the so-called deadbeat dads. It paid off for him. Look at the numbers in Florida. Among women voters, Bill Clinton, 55 to 39. That's a pickup of 13 points for him over the race in '92. In Ohio, among women voters, Bill Clinton won 50 to 41. That's a pickup of 9 percentage points over the race in '92. And we're seeing the same thing in other states, in Pennsylvania, in New Jersey, in Michigan. He went after the women's vote, and today he got it.
Thanks, Ed. Bob Schieffer on the congressional desk. Turnovers for the Democrats thus far, and what do we know about the House races?
Well, you called all those races, but thus far in the Senate, we've had only one turnover, and that is the Republican seat up in New Hampshire, Bob Smith. That turned over to the Democrat, Dick Swift. I think the big news right now, though, and I think you pointed it out, is the win for Max Cleland down in Georgia. If the Democrats are to have any chance of taking the majority in the Senate, and so far it's far from certain that they will be able to do that. I would say at this point Republicans are still going to control the Senate. But if Democrats have any chance, They had to win that race in Georgia, and frankly, Dan, to me, the air seemed to go out of the Cleveland campaign in the last couple of weeks. He was ahead most of the time, then this race closed at the end. He was far outspent by the Republican, but it appears that he has pulled it out and won. So that's the big deal for the Democrats.
And besides Georgia, the Democrats have held on to seats in New Jersey and in Massachusetts. Our CBS News coverage of election 1996 continues after these messages.
This portion of CBS News Election Night coverage is sponsored by Merrill Lynch. For our clients, the difference is planning. The difference is Merrill Lynch. And by Pontiac and your local Pontiac dealer. We are driving excitement. And by new Axid AR, proven so effective it can prevent heartburn completely.
We're going to go now to Harry Smith on our cyber set. Remember that it's only the cyber set that's virtual. Harry is manually operated.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. People are wondering tonight, especially Republicans, why is Bob Dole having problems? Well, we can answer that question from cyberspace a little bit tonight. Take a look back to this summer when Bob Dole came out and said, we want to cut taxes by 15% by all Americans. We have 60,000 people as they left the polls today. Could Bob Dole reduce the deficit and cut taxes at the same time? Look at that. 67% of the folks that we talked to after the polls today said no. A quarter of Bob Dole's voters told us no, he couldn't cut taxes and reduce the deficit. Now, how about this question? This comes from a pre-election poll. He may have missed the boat on this one big time, because Americans told us before the election today they think it's more important to reduce the deficit than it was to have their own taxes cut. So that's an issue, those 15% signs that we saw, campaign appearance after campaign appearance. That's why Bob Dole, that just never got any traction, Dan.
Thanks, Harry. Quick look at our map. 198 electoral votes in the column of President Bill Clinton, 55 for Bob Dole, including Dole winning Texas. But look at these states that still have not been decided in the presidential campaign. Georgia, South Carolina, Indiana. Let's go to Indiana. Our CBS News estimate is that in the presidential campaign, when all of the results are in and counted, Bob Dole will have carried Indiana. It was close. President Clinton managed to make it closer than Democrats usually do in Indiana, but our estimate is when all is said and done, Indiana goes to the Bob Dole column. So that means in the electoral vote count now, President Clinton has 168 electoral votes. Bob Dole has 67. It takes 270 needed to win. I want to remind you that the polls are still open in many, many states in the upper plains and upper Midwest and out in the West. For those of you where the polls are still open, please go out and vote. Your vote does count, and count plenty. Rita Braber is in Little Rock, Arkansas. Rita, are they talking landslide yet for President Clinton?
I really don't think that they are feeling strong enough at this point to talk about a landslide, Dan. But, you know, as you were calling some of those Senate races a little while ago, I couldn't help but remember that the president has really campaigned hard in some of those places just in the last few days, hoping to make a big difference. He made an emergency visit to Massachusetts for Kerry. He went to New Jersey for Torricelli. So he's got to be feeling pretty good that it might have at least helped. And especially because 2 years ago, when he was in bad shape, there were a lot of Democratic candidates who did not really want Bill Clinton on the same stage with him. That was different, and the president didn't really ask voters to give him a Democratic Congress this time, but what he did do, what he kept pointing out, and what they think worked was, they say, of course, that it was Republicans who tried to shut the U.S. government down. Dan?
Thanks, Rita. Now, we mentioned the word landslide. Let me remind you, as you look at the map, that there's no assurance yet that President Clinton has even been reelected, much less talk of a landslide. He is off to a very strong start, having, with 270 electoral votes needed to win, President Clinton has 198 to Dole's 67. But let's go to Kevin Phillips, our CBS News consultant. Kevin, over the years, the definition of landslide has changed. I remember when George Bush won in 1988, he won by, what, 6 or maybe 7 percentage points, and Republicans called it a landslide.
Well, that's right. If you think of a landslide in terms of a sweep in the Electoral College of 3 or 4 to 1,
sometimes it can happen at 6 or 7 points. Usually it takes about 8 or 9% margin. Now, the president seems to be running more strongly, and certainly is in states like Ohio, New Jersey, Florida, than he did back in 1992. So if he's kicking up his margin by a couple of points, we're closing in on the landslide level. That's to say 8 or 9%. And if you start getting to that point, 8 or 9 percentage points margin, then you're probably getting to the point where you get 400 electoral votes, and that's a landslide in the Electoral College. So this is what we have to start watching for.
And also we're going to be watching how the House votes go as we roll across the timeline across the country. And those of you at home in states with the polls still open, you can be the deciding difference as to whether Speaker Newt Gingrich and the Republicans can retain control of the House of Representatives, or whether the Democrats take control of the House, or for that matter the Senate, and the presidential race is far from decided. Here's the point. Americans hold the greatest power in the world, and that is the power to steer this great nation. That's a tremendous power, a tremendous responsibility. If you haven't voted, please do so. Stay with our CBS News coverage. We'll be right back.
For the latest in-depth election results, log on to CBS News on the web at www.cbsnews.com.
Phil Jones is at Dole headquarters. Phil, as we look at the map of the electoral votes are coming, what we see is in states where the polls have closed, the states in white there are all southern states where the polls have closed, but still it's too close to call. Do the Dole people attach any significance and see any trouble with this? Of course, Florida's already fallen for Clinton.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what they are saying at this point on those states. You know, I think many of these calls so far, Mr. Dole is not surprised. He had virtually written off Pennsylvania, Illinois, and New Jersey. He didn't spend any time there. He decided to go and invest a lot of time in these last few hours in such states as Missouri, Tennessee, and Michigan. The big shocker to him has to be Michigan. He really thought he had a chance in Michigan. He went there several times in the last week or so, and it didn't work out. In Texas, he did go there one last time, and that has turned out all right for him. But I think at this point, they are not surprised at anything. I was talking with Mr. Dole's campaign manager just a day or so ago, and he said that he thought everything was going to where they had a chance until they got to California over the weekend. And at that point, there was just something that didn't seem right. And I think that they're prepared for everything that they're seeing here tonight. I don't think they're going to be surprised at the way it's going so far, even though you've not called it yet. Dan?
Thanks, Bill. Paul, Zahn, any new results in the gubernatorial ballot?
There are, and I just heard some of that Macarena music. This is Macarena time for the Democrats tonight because of the 11 races we're following, six of them have gone to the Democrats so far. In Missouri, Democratic Governor Mel Carnahan reelected despite being called the tax man Carnahan by his opponent because he raised taxes for education while she promised a $600 million tax cut. In Delaware, Governor Tom Carper, another incumbent, reelected. He is a very popular politician. Voting for him is a state habit. This is his 10th consecutive state win. In New Hampshire, a big Democratic pickup of the night in New Hampshire. State Senator Jean Shaheen elected governor there. The first Democratic governor elected in 20 years. The first woman governor elected there. Dan, for people who add up these things, it also makes her the second governor in the United States who is female after Christine Todd Whitman. So far, there is another female candidate we'll be watching later tonight.
And speaking of women on the ballot, we don't have returns yet. Indeed, the polls have not yet closed in Louisiana and Wyoming, where women are vying to become the first members of their sex to represent their states in the Senate. We'll keep you posted on that as time goes along. Let's go quickly now to Russ Mitchell at Newt Gingrich headquarters down in Georgia. Russ?
Hi, Dan. I can tell you that there are about 1,000 people at this party, but it has nowhere near the bang or the punch that we saw in this same room 2 years ago when the Republicans swept Congress. The reason for that is quite simple. Number one, Bill Clinton seems to be racking up tonight. Number two, the battle for control of Congress is shaping up to be a real battle. It has made the mood here a bit more tense. Even Newt Gingrich has backed off from some of his predictions of a couple of weeks ago. He said he thought the Republicans would pick up 18 seats in the House. Now he's saying 4. He also said 2 weeks ago he thought Bob Dole would win tonight. I can tell you he is not going going there anymore. One thing you need to know, Newt Gingrich will probably come out at 9 o'clock tonight and talk with reporters. Dan?
Thanks, Rod. Let's pause for a moment to remind you that you are watching election night coverage on CBS. There are races in the presidential races in individual states that are as tight as tick on a dog's ear here. And let me show you two of them. One is in Kentucky. The polls closed early in Kentucky, but in the presidential race in Kentucky, it's still too close to call. Bill Clinton has been clinging to a small lead for most of the night, but he is not at least yet there. Also, in Virginia. Now, the Senate race in Virginia was decided some time ago. But look how close it is in Virginia, 13 electoral votes at stake there. Bob Dole has been leading most of the way, but this is only with 21% of the precincts in and reporting. So these races have been tight all night long. The Republicans have held on to their Senate seat in Virginia. The Republicans have held on to their Senate seat in Kentucky, but the presidential races there are still very, very tight. Let's go around the table and talk a bit. Bob Schieffer, in the campaign to see who's going to win the House, we simply don't know enough. We may not know until the wee hours of the morning or days or weeks after this evening is over. But in the Senate, is the picture forming up?
I think it's coming out just about the way we've been thinking it was going to, and that is the Democrats have won everything so far that we thought they had a chance to win. We've had just that one turnover up in New Hampshire. With Bob Smith, the Republican, losing up there. I don't see the Senate changing very much, Dan, but you're exactly right on the House. I mean, this thing is in such a muddle right now that you can't say. We thought we'd find out in some of the early races in Kentucky and Indiana that there'd be some early signs. The one thing we have had, the first Republican freshman, there's 70 of them running tonight, did win his race. That's Mr. Whitfield there in Kentucky. But in all the other races where the Republican freshmen are involved, where the polls have closed thus far, they're all in very tight races.
Now, Ed Brady, would you still rate the Florida turnover, which is to say President Clinton carrying Florida as he did not do in 1992, as the most surprising result of the night?
You know, at this point, I don't think it's surprising. I think they expected to get it. I don't think they were at all surprised. I think they would have been surprised if they didn't get it. I think perhaps some of us who sat back and looked at it are surprised, but I'm convinced that they really wanted it. And I think it was one of the building blocks in what Bill Clinton really wants is a majority. He wants more than 50%. I think he wants it for a couple of reasons. Ego, if you will, from a historical perspective, to go down as a president who had a majority. And also, I think he wants to be in a position in a second term to not have people pick at him because he didn't get a majority.
Kevin Phillips, I hope you're plugged in with us over there. I wanted to ask you, what do we know about Ross Perot and what do you make of it? Now, Ross Perot did very well in Maine the last time. It's my understanding he didn't do nearly as well in Maine tonight, and in some other places hasn't done as well as he did the last time around.
Well, Ross Perot hasn't done as well as he did when he got 19% in 1992. But what's fascinating about Perot is he's the first major third-party candidate to come back and try to do it a second time 4 years later. That's a much tougher set of circumstances. I think he'll be thrilled if he cracks 10%, and frankly, all he really needs to do to punch the ticket of his party for the year 2000 with federal funding is to get 5%. But he shouldn't be measured against 1992. He's taken on a terrific challenge in trying to run again 4 years later and put his party on the ballot and for the money.
In the Sunflower State, Kansas, both of the Kansas Senate seats are going to remain Republican. Now, this is so-called seat B. This is the one left open when Bob Dole resigned. Sheila Fromm came in to immediately replace Bob Dole, and she lost in the primary. It turns out the man who beat her in the primary, Republican Sam Brownback, when all the results are in and counted, our CBS News estimate is that Sam Brownback, who's been in Congress since 1995, he was one of those elected not very long ago, will be moving up to the Senate. So, Bob Schieffer, both of those Kansas Senate seats remain Republican.
Kind of a little footnote here. Kansas voters, Nancy Kassebaum, of course, one of the most popular members of the Senate from Kansas, retired. They had 3 chances to elect another woman to replace her. They had Sheila Fromm, who ran in the primary of one of those races. She got beat, and then there were women candidates in both of the other Kansas Senate races, but in both cases, the male candidate won. That's apropos of nothing, but I just thought I'd mention it.
On the basis of what we've seen so far, your sense is the Republicans do or do not remain in control of the Senate?
Oh, I think at this point they've won everything that they thought they were going to win. We've had only one turnover for all the races that have been called, and that is the Republican seat that was lost up in New Hampshire. But at this point, Republicans have won about what we thought they'd win, and so far Democrats have won about what we thought they would win.
Paul is on. I have a question. When women watch the election returns, do they pay very special attention or just special attention to women candidates?
I don't know that they pay special attention. I think women view the whole political process different than men. Exit polls tell us that the women have always viewed the Democratic Party as the one they could trust to take care of their needs, and consequently that may affect the way they view some of these individual races.
And our CBS News coverage will continue in a moment. It's 8:30 in the East. Headline of the hour, the balloons and champagne are on standby at Clinton headquarters in Arkansas. Fizzle on tap at Dole Campaign Central. Arkansas had its polls close at 8:30, and our CBS News estimate is that President Clinton and Vice President Gore will carry Arkansas in the presidential race. No, we do not yet know how that Senate race will go in Arkansas. And that means we leave open here. Let me show you how things are shaping up in the Senate. In races for the Senate, these states still have a situation in which the polls have closed, but we do not yet know how the Senate race is going to turn out. Alabama is one. Keep in mind the Democrats have held on to Sam Nunn's seat in Georgia, Max Cleland winning that race there. But in Arkansas, in Alabama, and in Virginia, the polls have closed, but we do not yet have enough information to tell how it's going to go. Let's take a look at that Virginia Senate race and show you what the actual votes in and counted look like, with 23% of the precincts reporting John Warner has a lead over Mark No Relation Warner, the Democrat, but it is not, at least not yet, anything approaching an overwhelming lead. Now, Bob Schieffer, let's pull back for what we call on television the wide shot. The Republicans are in at least fairly good shape in trying to hold on to the control of the Senate. We don't know much about the House yet.
That's exactly right. The Republicans have lost one seat, the New Hampshire seat that was held by Bob Smith, but we still have some very close races, 10 close races that have not been called yet. Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Nebraska, those are all held by Democrats. We have Virginia, Maine, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, and South Dakota. Those are seats that are all held by Republicans. Now, in some of those states, the polls haven't even closed yet. But all of those races are very close races. So it's far from certain. We think the Republicans are going to retain control of the Senate, but it's far from certain.
Well, it's starting to look like a very good night for Bill Clinton and the long kiss goodnight for Bob Dole in the presidential race. President Clinton now within striking distance of the 270 electoral votes needed to be reelected. He doesn't have them as yet, but he does have 204 electoral votes by our CBS News count. And keep in mind, we are announcing to you what we believe we know. These are not projections. This is what we think we know about the presidential race. So, Ed Bradley, how did Bill Clinton put together what he has put together so far? Very solid base in the Northeast and putting up a fight in most of the southern states.
And also among women voters in every region of the country. And I think a big factor for the president has been the Catholic vote. 28% of the electorate in this country are Catholics. Ralph Reed of the Christian Coalition called the Catholic votes the jump ball of American politics. Whoever comes down with it generally wins the election. Ronald Reagan in 80 and 84. George Bush won it in 88. Last election, Clinton and Bush split the Protestant vote, but the president got a 9 percentage point advantage over Bush among Catholics and was elected. Taking a look at what he's done this time, in Pennsylvania, President Clinton is pulling down 53% of the Catholic vote. Bob Dole only 35%. In Connecticut, the president is getting 52% of the Catholic vote. Bob Dole only 38%. And then in other states, Massachusetts, the president is getting 60% of the Catholic vote. Rhode Island and Illinois, better than 50%. There was some organized opposition because of the partial birth abortion bill, but it's not working for him.
South Carolina goes to Bob Dole. Our CBS News estimate is that when all the votes are in and counted, this is the way it will look in terms of percentages. Bob Dole carrying the Palmetto State, as was widely expected. Senator Strom Thurmond has been returned to the Senate as a Republican for there. So another very good night for Bob Dole in South Carolina. Kentucky goes to Clinton. It's been out there a long time, but our CBS News estimate now is that they're in strong tobacco country, that Bill Clinton, despite his anti-tobacco stand, when all the votes are in and counted, that he will again have taken Kentucky's 8 electoral votes. Now, I want to take you to the presidential map here for just a moment and show you what's beginning to develop, that the Republicans felt that they would have some difficulty in the Northeast, and they were right. What they also felt is that they could carry a number of the southern border states and perhaps get a solid South. That is not going to happen, because as you look at our map now, with President Clinton having 212 electoral votes sewed up, remember he needs 270 to win. Bob Dole has 75. Texas is the biggest state he's covered. This is the way the map looks. Look, all this blue from the Northeast swinging on down through the southern border states and on into the Midwest and the lower Midwest, Illinois, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida flashing down there. That means that last time Bill Clinton didn't carry Florida, this time he did. So what Bob Dole has, and all he has in the South so far nailed down, Alabama and South Carolina. Now, in the Senate situation, this is the way things look overall. The Democrats need 18 of the 34 Senate seats that are up for grabs tonight. So far, they have 8, and the Republicans have 9. Better news for the Republicans, if you look at the map, they've done much better in the Senate races in the South than they have done in the presidential race so far. Bob Schieffer, what about this, that particularly what used to be called blue-collar Catholics in the Northeast once were part of the foundation of Ronald Reagan winning the presidency big time twice? What's happened?
Well, I don't know, but you know, I was just listening to Ed Bradley talk about that, and to me that is an astonishing development here, and it may be just a sign of what a blowout this is going to be before it's all over, because here you had one candidate who was clearly pro-choice and another candidate who was clearly anti-abortion, Bob Dole, and yet you had this big Catholic vote going for Bill Clinton. I mean, I find that just a remarkable
we'll be talking more about that as we go along. Harry Smith, back on the cyber set. 3 important issues to Bob Dole.
All right, we're going to take a look at the reality from cyberspace right now, Dan. What were the most important issues to Bob Dole voters today? We talked to 60,000 people as they left the polls. This is what they told us. Bob Dole's voters said the most important issue to them, taxes and the deficit. Remember those 15% signs that you saw all through the campaign? That was what Bob Dole campaigned on, and that was his voters believed in. What about Bill Clinton, though? Most important issues to Bill Clinton's voters today, economy and jobs. And we've talked about it all evening. We're going to talk about it a lot more through the night. Economy and jobs, a big issue. The economy's performing pretty well, and Americans are pretty much sticking with the status quo. Number 2, though, Medicare and Social Security. The president has tried to vilify the Republicans over the last couple of years on issues like Medicare and Social Security, and it looks like the folks that bought that argument were voting for the president of the United States. Pocketbook, pocketbook, pocketbook. It's the economy, stupid, is what Bill Clinton said 4 years ago. Take a look at this one, Dan. Family finances. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? All the states lit up in green. At least a third of the people in all the states lit up in green said, yeah, my family's finances are better off now than they were 4 years ago. That tells an awful lot of the story. Dan?
Well, we were talking about what was the attraction of blue-collar Catholics in the Northeast. Whether you're Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, or what have you, the economy and jobs are always very important in an election. We talk about the base of Bill Clinton plan, building as he seems to be to a re-election, again, it's the economy stupid in very important ways. I want to show you, by the way, pause here, coming up at the top of this next hour, these are the states where the polls, additional poll closings will be taking place. All of those states in gold up there. Now, that means at 9 p.m. or shortly thereafter, Bill Clinton could, underscore the word please, could have nailed down enough electoral votes to be assured of renomination. So that's one reason you want to stay in here with us. I do want to remind everybody in states where the polls are still open, particularly out west, there's plenty of time for you to get to the polls. We do urge you to go to the polls and vote. Bill Clinton has, at this hour, in terms of electoral votes, he has passed the 200 mark. He needs 270 to nail down re-election. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages. Ross Perot is running at a rate where at least not yet, he is going to get into double-digit percentile. One of our storylines is if President Clinton wins, does he get above 50%? Far too early to say whether even he's going to win, much less whether he gets over 50%. But that's one of the stories we're following. Also, who is going to control the House? Will Speaker Newt Gingrich be returned to power or not? We're covering that storyline very closely as well. Let me show you what the electoral vote count shows at this hour. 270 needed to win. Clinton has 212. In the overall national vote in the presidential race, this is what we have in terms of actual votes in and counted in the presidential race. We'd hope to show that to you. For the moment, we do not have it. We'll be able to get that up for you maybe after a bit. Now, when we come back at the 9 o'clock hour, all of these states are going to have polls closing, and we should have some results from them for you. If we can put up the overall national popular vote, if we have it, we should do that right now. If not, and this is the popular vote, 7% of the precincts reporting nationwide. This is how it's running. Clinton running at a 47% rate. Keep in mind how badly he wants to get over 50% so he can say he has a, quote, mandate. Bob Dole's running at roughly 45% and Perot with 8%, but that's only with 7% of the precincts reporting. And when it comes to this year's nominees for the lowest, meanest mud wrestle and slugfest in advertising, there was no shortage of nominees. But 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace has found some that stand out rather smellily from the rest for dishonorable mention. Michael?
Basically one, Dan. As you say, there were lots of nasty political campaigns, but for out-and-out mudslinging, it was hard to beat the Torricelli versus Zimmer Senate race in New Jersey. Torricelli's won. This one was down, dirty, and a third D word, it was deceptive. Take a look at one of the most controversial ads in the entire country, a commercial run by the Republican Dick Zimmer against the fellow who beat him, Democrat Bob Torricelli.
In another bizarre twist in this year's New Jersey Senate race, the Bergen Record reported that Bob Torricelli was involved with an indicted Korean bank embezzler.
This looked just like a bulletin on your local news, but it wasn't. It was a campaign commercial. The woman you're looking at is an actor, not an anchor woman. But you didn't know that unless you saw a short, faint, typewritten message at the beginning of the ad. And Torricelli's ads were also misleading.
New Jersey, meet Dick Zimmer. He voted against covering mammograms to detect breast cancer.
Truth is, he really didn't. Zimmer never voted against mammograms, though he did vote against a bill that would have allowed Medicare recipients annual mammograms instead of one every 2 years. But that subtle distinction was lost in a campaign that was so dirty the candidates wound up arguing on the air about whose commercials were dirtier.
New Jersey voters, beware. The negative ads being run by Dick Zimmer and the National Republicans against Bob Torricelli are a lie. Just remember, Dick Zimmer started his campaign by lying to you, so why should you believe anything he says?
Both candidates told us they had to run these commercials because they were not getting enough coverage from the local TV news programs. But the experts tell us those ads were so dirty that they convinced a lot of voters that it wasn't worth it to vote. Nonetheless, Dan, as you and I know, don't expect attack ads to go away. They work.
He worked for Torricelli in New Jersey. He held on to that Democratic Senate seat there. Now, our CBS News estimate is in Alabama. It's roll, tide, roll for the Dole team. Our CBS News estimate is in one of the nastiest, smelliest campaigns of them all. A lot of people thought the stench from this would gag a buzzard. Jeff Sessions, the Alabama Attorney General, has beaten back the effort of State Senator Roger Bedford to fill the seat of retiring Democratic Senator Hal Heflin. Now, this is a pickup for the Republicans and increases their chances of holding on for control of the Senate. 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats have to win 18 to get control of the Senate. They've won 8. The Republicans have won 10, including this pickup now in Alabama. That's the reason the Alabama red map is flashing a bit. It means that's a pickup for the Republicans in Alabama. Bedford had called Sessions a, quote, and I quote now, jacuzzi-soaking, Gucci-wearing, Grey Poupon-eating, champagne-toasting, liberal country club Republican. But whatever he was good enough to win. Jeff Sessions wins the Senate race in Alabama. Bob Schieffer.
There's strong letter to follow.
Strong letter to follow. Now, there are 3 shaky Democratic House seats down there in Alabama. If the GOP holds on, gets those shaky Democratic seats in Alabama, along with carrying the state for Bob Dole in the presidential race, along with picking up a Senate race, Alabama is going to be big in a new Congress. Before we get to that, though, Virginia, just in, Senator John Warner, the Republican seeking his 4th term, will be returned to the United States Senate. Now, this was against Mark No Relation Warner, a high-tech entrepreneur. The recent polls had shown the incumbent Republican John Warner looking pretty good. Our CBS News estimate is that he will finally wind up winning about 53 to 47%. Bob?
So, Dan, what I think that means, I believe the Republicans now have 45 seats in the new Senate, which would mean if they win 6 more, that would be a majority. If my calculations are correct, we have 15 more races to be decided. What did you say? The Democrats have won 8 so far. The Republicans have won 11. At any rate, I think the magic number now for the Republicans to take this, hold the Senate is to win 6 more of the 15 races we still have to decide.
Well, the Senate Majority Leader, Republican Trent Lott, will be whistling Dixie when and if he gets over that 50 mark.
Well, he whistles that a lot anyway. So.
Kevin Phillips, what about Ross Perot? He's running well behind where he ran the last time out. For example, in Maine, where he ran 2nd in the last presidential race, didn't do nearly that well this time.
Well, I think Ross Perot has had an impact in a way that doesn't entirely register in the vote totals. His presence in the race helped the ethics issue develop against the president quite a bit in the last 2 weeks, and that's a minus for him. But at the same time, the Republicans are very unhappy because they thought that in a head-to-head with Bill Clinton, they could polarize. And they tried some of that, and the beneficiary in some ways was Ross Perot. He was there to pick up some of the chips. So Perot has cut a little bit of a swath here. It shouldn't go unnoticed, even if he winds up staying in single digits.
Now, I want to remind everybody that in these states, and take a look at our map, in the states where it's black or gray, the polls are still open and you have time to vote. Coming up at 9 o'clock, these states, the ones in gold, will have polls closing. And if you're saying to yourself, well, when is President Clinton going to go over the 270 Electoral College mark, if he is to do it, or if Bob Dole's to turn things around, when is he going to do it? One way to do it is to say that it may happen over the next 20 to 30 minutes. This could be the hour of decision. North Carolina, presidential race, 14 electoral votes, they go to Bob Dole. Our CBS News coverage will continue in a moment. President Clinton, 212 electoral votes. Bob Dole, 89, 270 needed to win. In the Senate, Republicans doing well. In the House, it's hard to tell. Coming up, as the clock passes the next hour, all these states in gold will have polls closing. A lot of interesting races. It could be the hour of decision. The next 15 to 20 minutes are going to tell us plenty. Ed Bradley, in the presidential race, states closing next hour, ones to watch.
I'd say New York, because it's a big state with a lot of electoral votes expected to go for the president. Arizona, because it's in play. And a Democrat hasn't won there since Harry Truman in 1948.
Bob Schieffer, Senate races to watch in the states with polls closing at the hour.
Well, we still have some, I think it's 9 seats held by Republicans, 7 held by Democrats. If the Republicans can pick up just 6 more seats, they'll retain control of the Senate, Dan.
Bob Schieffer, and this is the way the popular vote looks at this hour. As I say, stay for election coverage with CBS. Bulletin: Bill Clinton wins re-election. It's 9 p.m. in the East. Headline of the hour and the night: President Bill Clinton has become the first Democratic president in 60 years since the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt to be re-elected to a full second term. Still unclear, does President Clinton crack the 50% of the total vote mark? And who is going to control the Congress, most especially who's going to control the House? But Bill Clinton has been reelected. This is not a matter of projection. This is a matter of announcing that he has the electoral votes needed to win. This is the way the map looks. The Electoral College map looks just now. President Bill Clinton with 275, Dole with 97, 270 needed to win. It's Clinton, and here's the picture from Little Rock as the celebration is just beginning. Now, after giving you Mr. Map and taking you live to Little Rock, let's look over the individual states. In the Empire State of New York, 33 big electoral votes dropped for Clinton and Gore. And also Wisconsin, 11 electoral votes. Wisconsin has a Republican governor, but it wasn't enough to give Bob Dole a win there. Clinton wins Wisconsin. In Minnesota, 10 electoral votes in Minnesota drop for Bill Clinton, and the Democrats hold on to their Senate seat there as well. Nebraska's 5 electoral votes, Cornhusker votes, go to Bob Dole. He picks up Nebraska. New Mexico, Bill Clinton wins New Mexico's 5 electoral votes, although the Republicans hold on to their Senate seat there. Pete Domenici is a winner. We'll have more about the Senate seats a little later on. In Rhode Island, Bill Clinton wins Rhode Island's 4 electoral votes. The Democrats also have a Senate seat there. Reed has won that Senate race. Wyoming drops for Bob Dole as expected, and bad news for those of you pulling for a woman Senate candidate, because the woman Senate candidate has lost to Enzi. We'll have more about that a little later on. But the headline of the hour is Bill Clinton has done it. If you hark back to 1994 and the absolute hurricane kind of tide that swept Republicans into Congress, nobody believed at that time that Bill Clinton would be tonight re-elected President of the United States, but he's done it. Now, Ed Bradley on the presidential desk, how did he do it?
He did it by emphasizing a number of qualities. We talked to voters to find out which qualities about the candidates were important to them. And if you ever got tired of hearing Bill Clinton saying that he was going to build a bridge to the 21st century, the voters didn't, because you asked them what was important. Who has a vision for the future? Bill Clinton. Who is in touch with the 90s? Bill Clinton. People laughed at him when he said, "I feel your pain." Who cares about people like me? The voters felt Bill Clinton did. Where did Bob Dole win? People who felt he was honest and trustworthy. He got that. He stands up for what he believes in. But it was apparent that what was important here were these qualities. Someone who had a vision for the future, someone who was in touch with the 90s, and someone who cared about people like me. That's what won for the voters. Add that to the bottom line, the pocketbook issues, jobs in the economy, Social Security, Medicare, that's what did it for him.
All of which reminds us to remind you, those of you in states where the polls are still open, your vote can decide whether President Clinton now gets it better than 50 percentile of the total vote. Does he get a mandate or not? Your vote can decide whether Republicans hold on to control of the Senate. Your vote can decide whether the House remains in the control of the Republicans and Speaker Newt Gingrich. And there are plenty of other issues on that ballot. You have time to vote, and we urge you to do so. Let's go now to our CBS News correspondent, Bob Schieffer. Why did Dole lose, Bob?
I think it's a campaign that just never got started, Dan, and I think it just underlines again, when the economy is in pretty good shape and the nation's at peace, it is very, very difficult to unseat a sitting president. And in my view, Bob Dole, for all his fine war record, for all his distinguished career in the Senate, really never articulated a strong reason for saying Bill Clinton ought to be replaced. I mean, at one point in the campaign, I was struck by how he He was reduced to saying the economy is not as good as you think it is. That's kind of like back in the Vietnam days. When you had to ask, are we winning, you're probably losing. I think it's just a campaign that never got going.
Let's go to Little Rock and Presidential Advisor George Stephanopoulos. Thanks for being with us, George.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Just over the top. Well, the question is, how are you? How does it feel? What's the president doing? What is he now hoping for on the rest of the returns?
Well, right now it's too good to be true, but the most important thing you said, Dan, is there are a lot of polls still open, and everybody should get out there and vote. But the president is very gratified. You know, if this holds up tonight, he's the first Democrat since Franklin Roosevelt to be reelected. And I think that's a real vote of confidence in the direction he's taking this country. And he's up watching with Hillary and Chelsea and her friends now, and he feels great.
George, no president has had a really successful second term since possibly President Eisenhower back in the 1950s. What makes you think, given all these charges about ethics, character, and scandal, that William Jefferson Clinton can have a successful second term?
Well, the president's answered those charges, and the people have spoken tonight. They know they can count on President Clinton to fight for them. And that's exactly what he's going to do in the second term. He's going to reach out to Republicans, reach out to independents, make sure we balance the budget in a fair way, educate every American, and move 1 million people from welfare to work, and we're going to do it.
Is the president, or is he not, going to form a kind of bipartisan government for the second term, pulling in at least 1 or 2 Republicans into high-ranking positions?
Well, he'll have some announcements to make real soon, we hope, Dan. Let him savor this victory for a moment. But he really does want to reach out to Republicans, make sure we've shown this year that when the parties work together, we can achieve an awful lot. And that's exactly what the president wants to do over the next 4 years.
George Stephanopoulos, would you agree or not agree that if Bill Clinton fails to get 50% of the popular vote, that he will not, in fact, have a mandate?
Oh, I don't think that's true at all, Dan. I mean, if things keep going in this direction, we might get more electoral votes than last time. We might even pick up some seats in the House and the Senate. And clearly, he'll have a higher percentage than last time. Also, it is unprecedented over the last 40 years for a Democratic president to get reelected. That is a big vote of confidence in the direction Bill Clinton wants to take this country.
George Stephanopoulos, congratulations. Congratulations to you, the President and the First Lady. You, George, no one has worked harder. Nobody has cared more about Bill Clinton winning this election. Congratulations to you. And let me pause and say that anybody who thinks that Bob Dole's public service to the United States of America will end with tonight's defeat at the polls simply does not know Bob Dole. We'll be talking about that as the night goes along. In the meantime, let's go to Kevin Phillips. Kevin, how and why did Bob Dole lose this election, besides the fact you had an incumbent president with a pretty good economy and the world at peace, at least as far as the United States is concerned?
Well, I think Bob Dole had some problems from the start. He was old. He was going to be 73 before the inauguration. He was a leader of Congress, which is not a talent pool in the eyes of the American people. And he'd been running for president for 20 years. He was a vice presidential nominee back in 1976. He just never had the freshness and the optimism and the youthfulness that Americans tend to want. That's a tough thing to overcome.
Well, also tough to overcome is a get-up fighter like Bill Clinton. Now, our CBS News estimate is he has at least 275 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. And I'm reminded of that old New York fighter when he finally died. Somebody called his manager and said, to inform him, the manager said, stand over him, start counting, he'll get up. There's always been that quality to Bill Clinton. Were you surprised, Kevin Phillips, that he came back after the 1994 defeat?
No, not really, because the seeds of hubris and partial self-destruction were there with the Republican Congress. And I think that Newt Gingrich was an essential ally in Bill Clinton's comeback. And as you saw the Republican Congress overreach, you saw the possibility of Bill Clinton coming back. And of course, we couldn't bet that he'd do it as well as he did. But the chance has been there for a while.
You know that Speaker Gingrich will be turning a backflip or something akin to that to hear you say that he was responsible for Bob Dole's defeat. He's going to say, don't you expect, listen, Senator Dole has to take responsibility for himself.
Well, I don't think Newt's going to be talking about Bob Dole's responsibility or lack of it for the defeat. But what I'm suggesting is that the role of the Republican Congress was vital in Bill Clinton's reelection, and polls showed that. That people were asked if there's going to be a Republican Congress, should you have a Republican president to help it or Bill Clinton to block it? And by about 2-1, they wanted Bill Clinton to block it. So that's why I say Gingrich played a role in Clinton's resuscitation.
Thanks, Kevin Phillips. Now, President Clinton has enough electoral votes to win. Does he get over 50% in the national vote? We have to see. In the Senate races at 9 p.m., 8 Senate seats were up where the polls closed. Let's look them over. In Minnesota, a state that is gone in the presidential election for President Clinton, Senator Paul Wellstone seeking a second term. He gets it over former U.S. Senator Rudy Boschwitz. Now, this race was so nasty that people in Minnesota had to send the kids out of the room every time a commercial came on TV. This was up there with New Jersey, and the Georgia race and some others that was really nasty. You couldn't watch campaign coverage without a V-chip in this race. It turns out the Democrats win it. Senator Paul Wellstone pulls it out, and that's a hold-on for the Democrats. New Mexico Senate, a Republican seat. Pete Domenici, and Domenici is chair of the Senate Budget Committee. He's passionate about balancing the budget. If the Republicans hold on to the Senate, as it now looks like they have a very good chance to do, President Clinton is going to have to do mucho business with Pete Domenici. Rhode Island Senate, Claiborne Pell, the Democrat retiring in Rhode Island, our CBS News estimate is, when all the votes are in and counted, that Representative Jack Reed, a congressman since 1991, Reed's well-known name in the state's Democratic edge, helped him win the race over Nancy Mayer, the Rhode Island State General Treasurer. That's a hold-on for the Democrats. And out in Wyoming, Kathy Carpin, a Democrat, former Wyoming Secretary of State, put up what the Democrats called a whale of a race, but it wasn't enough. Mike Enzi, a Wyoming state senator, will hold on to this seat for the Republicans. This is the seat that was held by Alan Simpson, one of the most outstanding members of the Senate. And Alan Simpson retired, said he'd had enough of it. There was a close race in the eyes of many, but our CBS News estimate is that when it's all over, Mike Enzi, the Republican, will have held on to this Senate seat for the Republicans in Wyoming. Now, let's pause for a second, go to our map, and show you where things stand in the race for control of the Senate. 34 seats open tonight. The Democrats have to win 18 to get control of the Senate. They have to win 18 seats tonight to make sure that Trent Lott is not the majority leader of the Senate. On the basis of what we know so far, it looks like Trent Lott and the Republicans may indeed keep control of the Senate. Don't know enough yet about how the House is going to go. Bill Clinton wins re-election, first Democrat to get 2 full terms since FDR. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages. Big Ed Bradley, when did President Clinton, in your opinion, win this election? When was the decisive time?
It might have been during the Republican primary seasons, because I think Bob Dole was getting hammered every day, particularly by Steve Forbes. And at the same time, the Democratic Party, the Clinton campaign, was running commercials saying what a great job the president was doing, and you had to worry about the Republican Congress. Then when the primaries were over, after the conventions, they ran commercials and campaign where Bill Clinton stayed on message and Bob Dole didn't. First it was a tax cut, then it was ethics, then it was Whitewater, then back to the tax cuts, then campaign contributions. He never told people, this is why you should vote for me. He told people why they shouldn't vote for Bill Clinton, and it just didn't work.
Harry Smith is on our cyber set. Now, we've been using a lot of new technology tonight, and some of this technology is so advanced you need a 5th grader just to understand it. Not the case with Harry. Harry, where did Clinton get his votes?
I'll tell you what, you talk about support. Bill Clinton really connected with women in this election, Dan. Take a look at this. In all of the states that are lit up in green, Bill Clinton got 50% or more of the vote. 50% or more of the vote. We know more women than men vote, and we also know that Bill Clinton got even more women this time around than he did 4 years ago. The other group that he connected with, young voters. These are the first-time voters out of the box. Young voters overwhelmingly voted for Clinton. Those are the states that light up. Those are the votes that went to Bill Clinton tonight. Dan.
Thanks, Harry. As in this hour, we report that no doubt Bill Clinton has enough electoral votes to be assured of re-election. Our presidential map at the moment shows Bill Clinton with 275, Dole with 97. We go to Washington. Senator John McCain of Arizona, a close friend of Senator Dole. Thanks for being with us, Senator. First of all, how's Senator Dole doing?
He's doing just fine, Dan, and he's not going to be ever pessimistic or down. I spent the last 96 hours with him on a great experience, traveling all over the country. He's proud, I'm proud, and you know, I do think it's of interest that this popular vote, which was predicted by many of the networks to be in the teens, is now down around 3 or 4%. So we're not ready to give up yet, Dan.
I understand that, and one test of whether the president has a so-called mandate may be whether his winning percentage is, by 10% or more. But we'll see as that goes along. Senator McCain, you've been beating up on President Clinton about ethics and character pretty hard the last week or 10 days. Is it or is it not your belief that part of what people voted for tonight was to have these charges investigated by the Senate as one of the first orders of business in the new Congress?
Oh, I think they need to, but we also need to, Dan, have a Howard Baker there on the Democrat side. We need to have a bipartisan approach to this problem, and perhaps there's nothing there, but there's been enough reported in the media that we need an investigation, but I'd like to see it done on a bipartisan basis rather than have it just evolve into some kind of a dogfight. But look, I think that one of the reasons why you saw this closure in the popular vote is because of the recent disclosures, and I believe that we ought to give the president every opportunity and every chance to defend himself, he and his people, but at the same time, it needs to be looked into.
Senator, we have only about 30 seconds left, but everybody talks about campaign finance reform. You've talked about it until you're hoarse. It isn't really going to happen in the next Congress, is it? Or is it?
I believe it is. I believe it must. I believe that the American people are cynical. I think the latest revelations, not just confined to Democrats, but also on Republican side, indicate that we've got to have it, and we've got to have it on a bipartisan basis again. I hate to keep sounding that theme, but if you want to get things done for the American people, generally, you got to do it together, Dan.
Senator McCain, thanks for being with us. Tell Senator Dole and Lady Dole hello for us. Our CBS News coverage of Campaign 96 and the re-election of Bill Clinton will continue in a moment. Nebraska Senate race, our CBS News estimate is the Republicans will pick up a Senate seat in Nebraska. This is the seat of the retiring Democratic Senator Jim Exon. Governor Ben Nelson, the Democratic candidate, has been beaten by Chuck Hagel, an investor and businessman. That's a pickup for the Republicans in their battle to hold on to the Senate. It's looking good for them in the Senate. Now, we may see Michael Jackson's baby before we know the final outcome of this race for the House of Representatives tonight, because it's so tangled, so chaotic. It's certainly going to be a long time, but we are monitoring it closely. Arkansas Republican win in the Senate. This is another turnover for the Republicans. They're looking very good in the Senate indeed. President Clinton's coattails not enough for the Democrats in Arkansas. Now, our CBS News estimate is that when it's all over, that in Arkansas is for the first time going to send a Republican senator to Washington. Clinton carries his home state in the presidential race, but he fails in his effort to pull home a winner in the Senate race. Now, among the questions of the hour, we're going to take a little break here. At 9:30, we'll have some more returns for you. Are the Democrats? Clinton wins Louisiana. Big pickup for President Clinton. Now the question is, are the Democrats going to dance the mandate Macarena? Stay tuned here to this CBS News station. It's 9:30 in the east as election night rolls west. Headline of the hour, big train rolling for President Clinton. He has nailed down re-election. The voter verdict is still out on whether Republicans keep control of the House, whether Newt Gingrich remains the Speaker. And although they've got the key in the lock on the Senate and a very good chance for Trent Lott to remain the Senate Majority Leader, there's still important races still out there running hot, tight, and too close to call. In the Senate races, Bob, which ones are very tight and have been for most of the night?
Well, the ones in Nebraska, I believe we have called that, where the Republican won out there. We have 9 races left, Dan. What it boils down to, the Republicans need 2 more seats to take control of the Senate, and they're probably going to win in Alaska, where Ted Stevens would be a slam dunk. He has only token opposition, so give them 50 seats. They need to win only 1 more race, and there are 9 races still to be decided.
Well, let's go to our map here and show folks where things are in the Senate. 34 Senate seats up. The Democrats had to win at least 18 of them to take control of the Senate. So far, the Republicans have won 15, all the states in red. The Democrats have won 9, the states in blue. Now, the states where dark, it's black or gray on your set, the polls are still open in these states, and that means that you voters in those states may very well hold in your voting hand the decision on who's going to control the Senate, who's going to control the House, whether President Clinton gets more than 50% of the national vote or not. That's why we are urging you to go out and vote. Now, of the states still hanging out there where the polls have closed and we don't have definitive results, Ed, which one are you watching the closest?
Well, I think you're looking out at California to see how big this thing is going to be for the president, and also Arizona. As I said before, in Arizona, you haven't had a Democratic winner in 48 years, since Harry Truman in 1948. If he wins there, he could very well get this landslide that he's been looking for.
Let's check in with Rita Braver in Little Rock, where the celebration has begun. Rita, what about this talk that in a second term, President Clinton will try to give it at least a patina, at least a coloring of bipartisanship?
Well, I think he is really going to, and it's sort of ironic that just as we started talking, Tony Bennett came out here and started singing "The Best Is Yet to Come." That is certainly what the White House is hoping. And I guess one of the president's top wishes is that Kenneth Starr and the whole Whitewater prosecutor's office would finish up its business quickly. But really, I was struck so much, Dan, during this whole campaign at the way Bill Clinton seemed to connect with the people and with the crowds. But at the very same time, he didn't make a lot of huge sweeping promises. This was not an election where he talked about revolution. He talked about balancing the budget, protecting environment, and I guess if there is anything that he would really like to get a bipartisan majority for, it would be some kind of reform on education. He has been talking a lot about making 2 years of college after high school something that is possible for every American student, and I think in his 2 terms he would like at least to leave Americans with something that they could say, yes, that is something Bill Clinton did for us, Dan.
Rita, the possibility of Ken Starr giving up on his independent investigation, nobody could be seriously considering that. One, Ken Starr, for whatever else one may think of him, is a very experienced attorney, and he's methodically going through what he says is a very responsible and integrity-founded investigation. Besides that, Jesse Helms, the strong-willed Republican senator from North Carolina, is being returned to the Senate. Helms is a strong ally of Starr. Nobody really believes that Starr is just going to fade away.
I don't think that that is what the belief is, but I do think that they have been waiting such a long time for Starr to show his hand and tell them what charges, if any, he is bringing, that they just want to get it over. They want to know what they're facing. They are hoping, they say over and over again, that the President and the First Lady will not be touched, will not be charged with anything. But I think there is a great feeling down here that they want to get it over with. I was talking to former Senator David Pryor earlier today, and I asked him if he thought that Whitewater had hurt Democrats down here, and he gave me a big speech about what Arkansas Democrats really want is for Ken Starr to finish his business and get out of here. I don't think people are going to think that it's going to be easy. I don't think that they think it is going to be over soon, but I think they want at least to know what they're facing.
Rita, you talk to a lot of people in Washington. Is the consensus, or is it not, that First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton may be indicted?
I think, you know, there are a lot of Republicans who have been saying that, but the Clinton lawyers insist that that is not the case, and I just don't think that there is anybody on the outside who really knows the answer to that question, Dan.
Rita Braver, thanks. And let's note that this is whatever is in the future, this is certainly a night for President Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, their families, and for Democrats to celebrate, because they have come back from a near devastating defeat in the off-year elections of 1994 to win this 1996 election. That does not mean that votes in states with the polls still open in the West don't count, and count for plenty, which is why we keep urging everyone in states where the polls have not closed to go out and vote. Paul is on. Let's talk about the referenda. When I talk about important things on the ballot out west, the big referenda questions to be decided tonight.
There's so many different kinds of referendas that were considered this year, and when we go back and sort of lump them all together, it seems that taxes were the biggest issue in the governor's races and among the ballot initiatives. In 27 states, voters were voting on measures, most of which were designed to make it harder for politicians to raise taxes. In Florida, for example, voters there considered a measure that would take a 2/3 majority to pass a tax hike. And according to our CBS News estimate, that one is projected to win. And Dan, what is abundantly clear about these measures is it appears as though taxpayers don't trust the politicians to limit their taxes in any way, so they've decided to take these issues into their own hands and beat the system, do an end run around the government. And so far, Florida is all we can talk about in terms of projections.
Thanks. Our CBS News coverage of Bill Clinton being the first Democrat to be re-elected to a second full term since FDR continues after these messages. Bill Clinton will be the next president of the United States, re-elected. This is what the Electoral College map looks like at this hour in the race for president. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Clinton already has 284. Now, there's a strong possibility that this may wind up being a so-called, quote, mandate-less election if the Republicans hold on to control of the Senate and control of the House. Now, every election night, you know, there's cardiac arrest time in some state, in some race, sometimes in several races. Tonight, it's in the granite state of New Hampshire. Let's take a look at the Senate race in New Hampshire. Now, keep in mind that early on in the evening, everybody, on the basis of exit poll information and other information, said that this would be a turnover and a pickup for the Democrats in New Hampshire. And we said that it looked like Dick Sweat was going to win that race. Now, he may still win that race, but it's hold your breath time on both sides because this is so tight. Keep in mind, this is with 22% of the precincts actually in and reporting. Let's put it up again to show folks just how close this thing is. Dick Sweat with 49%, Bob Smith with 47%. It's code blue time for both of these candidates. Both want badly to win. The Republicans have an incumbent senator there. It looked earlier in the evening like he was going down to defeat. Mark clearly what we're saying here. We are not saying that Dick Sweat has not won this race. What we are saying, it is tightened up. It's really gotten tick tight in the last few hours, and it may be one of those races that's it's a long, long time before you can say definitively that Dick Sweat has actually won this race or that the Republican Bob Smith has held on. We'll keep you posted as we go along. You know, on these election nights, things can't go absolutely perfectly, and we try to pass along candor when convenient, partly to keep you apprised of the fact that, you know, this is live television, and if it weren't, you might think it was a rerun if we didn't have something like this come up. So all we can tell you and what we're telling you is in New Hampshire, things have really tightened up, and that's a race we'll be keeping our eye on. Now, Bob Schieffer on the congressional desk. Looking bleak for the Democrats in the Senate. Still much too early to tell in the House, although in one of the Kentucky House seats, I'm told that the Republicans stand a very good chance of picking up a seat from a Democrat.
I think that's right. In getting back to the Senate, Dan, I think the important thing as to who's going to control the Senate, whatever happens in that race up in New Hampshire, Republicans have already won 49 seats tonight. They need to win only 2 more. In order to control the Senate. We have a little chart here. The current Senate, 47 Democrats and 53 Republicans. There were 34 seats that were being contested tonight. So far, the Republicans have won 15. The Democrats have won 9. There are still 10 races to be decided. But again, that brings the Republicans up to 49 seats. All they need is 2 more. And in Alaska, Ted Stevens, the veteran Republican senator up there, looks like a slam dunk. He has only token opposition. So basically, the Republicans have already won 50 seats in the Senate. They need to win 1 more of 9 to keep their majority in the Senate. I can't imagine they're not going to do that.
So that leaves the open questions. Does Bill Clinton, or does he not, get above 50% of the total vote in the country? That's going to be decided in the states out west where polling is still going on. One reason why anybody who lives in the west or any place in the state where the polls are still open, your vote is so important. Whether Speaker Newt Gingrich and the Republicans retain control of the Congress. is also in the hands of voters in the states where the polls have not yet closed. With 22% of the precincts across the country reporting this is the way the popular vote looks, it may or may not be these percentages near the end. One thing we're watching, does Ross Perot or does he not break into double digits? Does Bob Dole or does he not finish above 40%? George Bush did not finish above 40% in the last presidential election, you will recall. What may be hanging the balance here, voters sometimes give a split decision. It could be that that's what's going to happen tonight, that the Democrats will get the White House, the Republicans will retain the Congress. And keep in mind, if the Republicans retain control of both houses of Congress, this will be the first time in a very long time that the Republicans have, in succession, won control of the Congress in 2 successive elections. So all of that is hanging out there in the balance. You know, it's no secret when it comes to political advertising. Some candidates and their consultants live with the credo, never underestimate the power of negative thinking. Millions of dollars are spent on advertising designed to accentuate the negative of your opponent, just to tear your opponent completely apart. 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace has some of the best and the worst of this year's ads designed to detract. Mike?
And Dan, I've been forced to wonder about some of the stuff that the politicians have been peddling in their attacks this year. Nasty stuff that beggars belief sometimes. First case in point, a Weld for Senate ad in the race that he ran and just lost to Senator John Kerry in Massachusetts.
She spent her federal disability check on drugs. He got a disability check every month and drank until the money was gone. Incredibly, John Kerry twice introduced legislation to keep paying monthly checks to alcoholics and drug addicts whose only disability was their addiction.
In the race for Congress, the issue is crystal clear.
And this from the Lefevre for Congress campaign in California.
It is not. Vic Fazio says that Tim Lefevre is an extremist because he believes that killers like Richard Allen Davis deserve the death penalty. Tim Lefevre says that those who have built their entire public careers defending people like Richard Allen Davis from the death penalty are the real extremists. And that, Congressman Fazio, is you.
I don't know what you think, Dan, but every time I see those ads and others like them, I wonder, do the candidates who pay for these ads really think Americans are stupid enough to believe that their political opponents want to coddle child killers or drug addicts? Apparently they do, Dan.
As long as those negative ads produce winners, and they produce some winners tonight, then people are going to use them. You know, in that New Jersey race, Mike, which Torricelli won for the Democrats, hold on for the Democrats, the old seat of Bill Bradley, someone wrote that that was a diss-a-minute Senate campaign in New Jersey. Let's check in with Phil Jones at Dole headquarters in Washington. What's happening, Phil?
Dan, 2 things to report. Number 1, Senator Dole is now here in the hotel in his suite, and Arizona Senator John McCain, a very close friend of his, has gone up to meet with him. He is expected down here sometime soon. Mr. Dole's press secretary has issued a statement, and let me quote from it. Bob Dole has completed his last political mission with courage and honor, even in defeat. He has much to claim in the way of success. Bob Dole led his party in this election, representing trust and conservative principles. And with Republicans headed, according to the Warfield statement, with Republicans headed toward retaining the leadership of Congress, this country, on the broadest front, endorsed what Bob Dole stands for. That is the concession statement. As far as Mr. Warfield is concerned, Senator Dole is expected down here at some point within the hour to address the people who have come. Dan?
Thanks, Phil Jones. And of course, we'll carry that live here on CBS. Bob Dole has conceded as at the presidential race, and we do expect to hear from him. Classy, honorable man and public servant that he has been and is. You can expect him to come down at some point and say something. Our CBS News coverage of Election Night 1966 will continue after these messages, so stay with us.
For the latest in-depth election results, log on to CBS News on the web at www.cbsnews.com.
Back at CBS News election headquarters in New York, this is the way the presidential race looks on a nationwide basis. 270 electoral votes needed to win. Bill Clinton already has 284. How big his win is in the final analysis depends on the states in black on that map. Those are the ones where the polls are still open. Now, the polls are closing in some places at the top of the hour. We'll have returns on that, of course, for you. And up in New Hampshire, closest Senate race in the country, this race between Dick Swett and Bob Smith is as hot and tight as a too small bathing suit on a too long car ride back from the beach. They have been locked really tight for a very long time, and it looks like it's going to continue this way. These are actual votes in and counted. Yes, we and everybody else in the galaxy had said earlier that this was a pickup for the Democrats. It may yet be. We're not saying that Dick Swett hasn't won this race. What we're saying is closing down and getting breathtakingly tight. Bob Schieffer, coming up at the top of the hour, 10 o'clock, best Senate race to look at.
Well, we still have to find out what happens down in Louisiana, where you have Mary Landrieu in that race down there with the Republican Woody Jenkins. No call in that race yet.
Very interesting, because the former Archbishop there said it would be a sin to vote for Bill Clinton and the Democrats, didn't he?
And also for Mary Landrieu, the Democrat, because she is pro-choice.
And coming up top of the hour, Ed Bradley, most important state to look for at 10.
The band of western states, Utah, Idaho, Nevada, and of course California. And I'm still looking at Arizona.
Gubernatorial races?
West Virginia. It has been running neck and neck. We're going to see if Charlotte Pritt, who attached her candidacy to the president, actually benefited from the coattail
Very
effect.
good race, because West Virginia is deciding whether to send its first woman to the governorship ever, or to send the oldest governor, bring him back, a governor who was governor way back in the 50s.
And he happened to be the youngest governor ever to serve when he was elected in the 50s. And if he wins tonight, of course, he would, as you just said, be the oldest.
And then later on in the evening, we will find out whether the first American of Asian heritage is going to be made a governor in Washington State. We have the referenda in California, the referenda on, for example, affirmative action out there. The polls are still open in California and so many of the western states. Let's pull up our map again, because I want to show folks where all those states in black still have the polls open, and we urge you to go out and vote. Right now, we urge you to listen to Harry Smith on the Cyber Set. Harry?
Here you go, Dan. We told you a little while ago about Bill Clinton's success with women voters, with Bill Clinton's success with younger voters. Let's take a look right now at how he did with seniors. Oh my, 50% of the seniors, these are older Americans, 60 and older, voted for Bill Clinton. A lot of people thought Bob Dole would have connected with these folks. He did not. And that's part of the reason for the Clinton success. Dan?
Closings at the top of the hour. Stay with CBS News, because at the top of the hour we'll begin to get a little bit better picture of how big Clinton's win is going to be.
CBS, welcome home.
Headline of the night. William Jefferson Clinton reelected. He's assured of having enough electoral votes to become the first Democrat since FDR to win two full terms as president. Looking good for the Republicans in control of the Senate and about control of the House. It may be decided on the West Coast. Headline of the hour, President Clinton not only reelected, but scratching toward 50% of the popular vote. We don't know whether he's going to reach that or not. Republicans are 2 fingers short of continuing their grasp of the Senate, and it's still hand-to-hand combat, seat for seat, about which party is going to control the House. Now, with the polls just having closed in 5 states, let's look over the latest returns. On the map, this is the way the electoral vote map reads. 270 needed to win. Clinton already is assured of having 291. That doesn't mean votes on the West Coast are not important. They are indeed. More about that later on. But we do urge you to go out and vote, because there is still time to vote. Dole has 106 electoral votes. Now, in terms of the Senate, this is the way the map, 34 Senate votes up, seats up tonight, 34 Senate seats up. The Democrats needed to win 18. They've won 9 so far. The Republicans have won 16. We know less about the House. Now, looking over the specific details details of states where the polls close at 10 o'clock. Iowa, 7 electoral votes. They go for President Bill Clinton. This repeats what he did in 1992. We do not yet know how the Senate race is going in Iowa. At least we don't have definitive word on that. Utah president, as expected, Bob Dole. Wins in Utah, picks up the 5 electoral votes there. Idaho, another strong Republican state, Bob Dole carries it. Now at 10 p.m. in the East, and the polls have just closed in 3 states with Senate races. We're going to look those over. In the the gem state of Idaho, Senator Larry Craig. The last time a GOP senator lost in Idaho was 1956, and it doesn't happen in 1996. This was one of the races the Democrats thought they just might win, but it turns out that they were dreaming. That Idaho may vie with Utah as Dole's best state, and it returns a Republican senator to the United States Senate. So in the Senate races, this is the way it looks with the returns that we just have given to you. 34 seats open. The Democrats needed to win 18 to get control of the Senate. It is not happening for them in the Senate. It may yet happen for them in the House, depending very heavily on votes in California and other places in the West. But the Republicans have won 16 of the 34 Senate seats up tonight. The Democrats so far have won 9. Ed Bradley, who's covering the presidency? Are voters giving the President Clinton a big mandate? I'm a little wary of the word mandate. So far, it's a mandate-less election in the view of many, and not all of them Republicans.
I think you could say right now that he's not getting a mandate. I think it's too early to say whether or not he will get one. But something is clearly taking shape here that you're seeing in the numbers that we're looking at. President Clinton has painted himself as a moderate, a centrist, who has done a lot of little things, but little things that have resonated with the voters. And if you take a look at the numbers, when we talk to people asking them what they wanted, more or less from government, you take a look at the numbers across the country, you see that people want a lot less. In Pennsylvania, 55% think the government should do less. In Minnesota, 57% said that they thought that the government should do less. We took a look in the Midwest. In Ohio, 57 to 39% people thought that the government should do less. And if you go to other states, in Wisconsin and Florida, you see overwhelming majorities of people who want less from the government in their lives. And I think if you're looking at what Bill Clinton can do now, 2 things spring to mind, particularly on the heels of this election. Campaign reform. People want it. And also entitlements. Less money, less government.
Let's go to Kevin Phillips, our veteran CBS News consultant. Kevin, given the form that the election has taken so far, with a lot of votes still out there, the polls haven't even closed in some places in the West. Given the form so far, are we likely to have in Washington a stalemate, anarchy, hubris, or some of all 3?
Probably some of all 3, and that's the interesting question. How much of each from where? What I think it's time to start thinking about is the president may get 7, 8, 9-point margin. That may be a landslide. It's certainly a near landslide. But if you look at the forces that he's going to face in Washington in 1997, you've got an almost certainly Republican Senate now. Some sense on the part of congressional Republicans, even if the House teeters, that they have gotten their ticket punched on Capitol Hill. You've got a special prosecutor. You've got a billionaire who's going to be entrenching a party that's going to make corruption the issue. You've got a lot of things that Bill Clinton faces that no newly elected Democratic president has faced in my memory. So this is a caveat to the landslide or near landslide or whatever the personal vote he gets is.
Thanks, Kevin Phillips. Let's go now to one of President Clinton's closest friends, Vernon Jordan, who's joining us from Little Rock. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Jordan. Have you talked to the president? How's he feeling? What's he saying?
I've not talked to him since the Declaration of Victory. I was with him shortly before that, and he was feeling reasonably confident and optimistic and anticipatory. And I'm certain by now that he is both relieved and feeling victorious.
Now, Bill Clinton, 50 years old, the first elected twice Democrat since FDR. How can he avoid overreaching? How can he avoid, as they would say in Arkansas, getting too big for his britches?
I think he's a very realistic politician. I think he understands what this election is about. It's about what he did for 4 years and what the American people hope he can do for the next 4 years. I think that he has shown great wisdom and great pragmatism in this campaign, and the American people have rewarded him for that.
How concerned is the president about the potential of his being sort of tied down, as Gulliver was, by the Lilliputians, by all this scandal investigation, ethics investigations that are bound to be unleashed?
Well, I think that he is committed to governance. And I think that he believes that the American people want governance and that he will proceed with that. Problems are not new to him, and he's dealt with them. And I think that he will deal with whatever he has to deal with. But I think that we will see the kind of leadership in the next 4 years that we've seen in the first 4 years. And I think, based on the first 4 years, we will get even better leadership in the next term.
Vernon Jordan in Little Rock, congratulations. You helped to make it happen. When the winners win, everybody says congratulations, and we do to you as well. Two very tight races, Senate races. First up in Maine, one of the tightest races of the evening. This is New Hampshire and not Maine. I should say New Hampshire. I pushed the wrong button again. That'll happen sometimes. You know it's live television. We do it that way. But nonetheless, in the Maine race, it turns out that was a control room error, so mark that one up for them. Susan Collins and Joe Brennan in this Senate race up there. Virginia, by the way, our CBS News estimate, this just in, Virginia falls for Dole in 13 electoral votes, 71% of the precincts reporting, and our CBS News estimate is that when it's all said and done, Bob Dole will have carried Virginia. We were up in Maine after a little live television confusion there, showing you the results so far of the Maine Senate race. Now, this is for the seat of the outstanding Republican Senator Bill Cohen, who retired, a moderate Republican. One of his former aides, Susan Collins, was trying to take his place. She may or may not win. Right now, she's leading with 11% of the precincts reporting. That's in Maine. Now, down in Louisiana, where a woman is attempting to become the first woman ever sent to the United States Senate from the state of Louisiana. It's an extremely tight Senate race down there. We'll have to see what happens in Louisiana. We put Texas up on our thing. Let's go again. Louisiana, send it. There we are. Woody Jenkins, the Republican, holding a lead over Mary Landrieu. It does not look good for the Democrats' chances of holding on to that Senate seat down there. It does not look good for the chances of Mary Landrieu, although it isn't over. The race has, it's not time to say that this race has been decided, but the woman, Mary Landrieu, is trailing in that race. Then we still have outstanding that race up in New Hampshire. Over in New Hampshire, this is the way this Senate race is shaping up in New Hampshire. Now, Dick Sweat now trails in a very, very tight race. 40% of the precincts actually in and reporting. Earlier in the evening, nearly everybody announced that Dick Sweat was picking this up for the Democrats. As you can tell, as the actual votes come in, it's narrowing down. We're not saying Dick Sweat hasn't won it. What we are saying is he trails in the actual vote count, so it's a race we're watching. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages. Republicans now have won 50 seats in the Senate, and they are saying to themselves, listen, we definitely have control of the Senate because in Alaska, the veteran Ted Stevens is considered an absolute walk-away winner there. And so the Republicans are saying we definitely will control the Senate in the next session of Congress. Now the question is whether Newt Gingrich and the Republicans will also control the House. That's being decided as we speak in states out west where the polls are still open, and we do urge everyone in polls where the states where the polls are still open to please go out and vote. Now, Bob Schieffer, on our congressional desk, how's the House shaping up? Are we going to get a few results in now?
Yes, we're getting enough results to say that at the least it's going to be very, very close. We believe 25 of the Republican freshmen, and remember there were 70 of them running, 25 of them have won. But some big seats have gone down. Out in Illinois, the seat that was once Dan Rostenkowski's, a Republican, took it the last time. Well, the Democrat, Rod Blagojevich, has taken it back for the Democrats. In North Carolina, Bob Etheridge has beaten David Funderburk, who was the Republican freshman down there, an aide to Jesse Helms. That is another seat that has fallen to the Democrats. Also in North Carolina, David Price, the Democrat who lost 2 years ago to Fred Heinemann. He has won that seat back. All of the freshmen that we thought would be in close races are in close races. Another Republican freshman who has lost, Bill Martini in New Jersey. As we say, though, 25 of the freshmen have won. The people we thought would be in close races are in close races. We've just had a little conference with all our experts back here. We think it is still very close as to who's going to control the House. It's by no means been decided. It could still go either way, Dan.
Thanks, Bob. Now, if it turns out that the Republicans retain control of the Congress, what we may wind up with as night goes along, keeping in mind that Bill Clinton is assured of being reelected. We don't know whether it's with more than 50% of the vote or not. We don't know what his final electoral count will be. But the Republicans rarely have had a simultaneous election of a GOP Congress with a Democratic president coming into office. In fact, it hasn't happened in this century. So if you have the situation where the Republicans control both houses of the Congress and the Democrats control the White House, what you may have in Washington after this election is a kind of stalemated Democratic president for the first time, because always in the past, when a Democratic president won re-election, he brought in with him a Democratic Congress every time this century. If it doesn't happen this time, we'll have a whole new dynamic at work. Let's go to Harry Smith on the cyber set. Harry, voters and what they've told us, concerned about the possible scandals developing in the new Clinton administration?
You bet they are, Dan. We got a dose of reality for the Bill Clinton victory party. Are they worried about scandals over the next 4 years? Take a look at this. We talked to 60,000 people as they left the polls today and asked them that very question. Are you concerned about scandals in the second term? 49% said yes, absolutely. Yeah, those are Dole voters, those are Perot voters, but 1/4 of Bill Clinton's voters think there's going to be trouble in the next 4 years ahead, too. Take a look at this one, though. This is another exit poll question. Is the President of the United States honest and trustworthy? 54% of the people in the country say absolutely not. As you talk about that potential Republican win in the House, if they do retain control of the House, there are going to be investigations aplenty and a big cloud hanging over Pennsylvania Avenue come Inauguration Day, Dan.
Thanks, Harry. Ed Bradley on the presidential desk.
Well, even with those figures that Harry points out, there were people who thought that there would be scandals. They voted for him. People thought he was not the trustworthy candidate. They voted for him. Even in Arkansas, which he won, 56% of the people in that state said he's not telling the truth on Whitewater. Yet they voted for him.
And they voted to send a Republican to the Senate from Arkansas for the first time in history. Linda Douglas, who's been following the very long trail of money in the campaign. Linda, soft money, what is it and what role did it play in this election?
Well, first of all, it's interesting in this election that money finally really has become an issue. This is going to be the most expensive campaign, federal campaign ever, an estimated $2 billion. And there is a system, of course, under the law that is supposed to regulate the amount of money that can be contributed, the amount of money that can be spent. But that system this year clearly broke down. Now, the law limits the amount of money that can go to candidates, but there aren't such tight restrictions on the amount of money that can be contributed to political parties. So this year, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party exploited a loophole in the law and went out and aggressively raised huge contributions, $100,000 plus contributions from corporations, rich people, labor unions, and that is what we call soft money. And let's look at some of these numbers. Now, the Democrats raised more than $95 million in soft money. That's more than 3 times what they raised 4 years ago. The Republicans raised about $111 million in soft money. That is more than double what they raised 4 years ago. Now, in their frenzy to go out and grab up all these huge contributions, the Democrats got caught in what appears to be a possible scandal. They either knowingly solicited some illegal contributions, or in the hurry to collect them, they failed to check the source of contributions, which turned out to be illegal. That has the whiff of scandal, and the White House is now bracing itself, as you have been saying all night, for a possible independent counsel investigation. Dan?
Well, Linda, you're as aware as I am that there are those in Washington who say if you believe there's going to be any meaningful campaign finance reform in this next Congress, you will believe that water runs uphill. Our CBS News coverage of Campaign 96 will continue in a moment, so stay here with us. History will record that Bob Dole was President of the United States. It will record that he never got to be president. But history cannot ignore that for a long career, Bob Dole was #1, a bona fide, genuine war hero, a public servant, and an American lawmaker. He's lost tonight, lost by what will probably turn out to be a fairly large margin. Phil Jones is at his headquarters in Washington.
Something has just happened within the last few minutes that sort of symbolizes the Dole campaign and the problems they've had. You remember that release I just read from where it was conceding? It came from Nelson Warfield, Mr. Dole's spokesman, saying that he had been defeated. Well, I want to bring that back because now the campaign has issued another release marked urgent, and it says 3 sentences. Due to an error, a statement from the Dole campaign was prematurely released to some news organizations this evening. The fact is, Bob Dole has conceded nothing. We regret any confusion this error has caused your news organizations. This is symbolic, as I say. Bob Dole has had trouble with his campaign organization. They have not had anybody at the very top who could both be the visionary, look out there and see those issues that he needed to go after, and also just to make the train run. A perfect example. Dan?
Well, Phil, you've been around Washington a long time. Does this qualify as kind of mondo bizarro business at the end of a long election campaign, or is it one of those things that just happens?
Well, when you have a losing campaign, everything seems to fall apart. And to that extent, I think what you've seen happen here. In this 96-hour tour we had, most of it was smooth until we got to the end. And at that point, everything was falling apart. They weren't getting the things there, getting the people out as they wanted to. You know, when it all goes wrong, everything goes wrong. Dan?
Thanks, Phil. And our CBS News coverage of Campaign 96 will continue in just a moment. Keep in mind that the polls are still open in many places in the West. Where they are open, we urge you to vote. But for the rest of you, we urge you to stick in here with us because there's a lot more ground to cover.
CBS, welcome home.
It's 10:30 in the East. Harkin wins, holds on to a Democratic Senate seat in Iowa. Biggest headline of the hour, elation in Little Rock for Bill Clinton. Waiting for concession in Washington from Bob Dole. Consolation for Republicans, they keep control of the Senate. But the keys to the House, a key question for the rest of tonight and maybe beyond. We do not know how the House is going to go. We can't say yet whether Speaker Newt Gingrich and the Republicans will continue to control the House or not. It hangs in the balance in western states where the polls are still open. Now, in a state where the polls closed some time ago, a Senate race that we've been holding off on because it was close. In Iowa, out in the Hawkeye State, the only major Democratic office holder in the state, Tom Harkin, had a tough fight. However, our CBS News estimate is that when all the votes are in and counted, Harkin will have won it. Now, Iowa used to be Dole's second political home, but he was so badly battered by Patrick Buchanan and Steve Forbes in barely winning the Iowa caucuses earlier this year that he really never recovered. And he lost Iowa tonight in the presidential race, Bob Dole did, and a Democrat wins his seat and holds on. This will be the third term for Tom Harkin, who is Union Labor's biggest friend in the United States Senate. Now, Bob Schieffer, who's covering the congressional desk, let's back off for that proverbial television wide shot. What's going on in the all-important battle for the House?
Dan, what will be very important to Newt Gingrich is that he has won re-election down at his home district down in Georgia. He has won and won handily over Michael Coles, a millionaire cookie maker. The question now is going to be, if the Republicans do not retain control of the House, will Newt Gingrich resign as Speaker? He has said he does not want, or he will, of course, would not be the Speaker, but he said he does not want to be the minority leader. So we'll have to see how that comes out. So far, there's Cynthia McKinney, the black Democrat down in Georgia, is losing right now. This is one of those redistricting districts. She is now losing. We've had two other Democrats in the South who have lost. Republicans are doing well in the House across the South. But Gary Franks, a Republican up in Connecticut, a black Republican, he has lost tonight. We think right now, Dan, that the Democrats are going to make a net gain of at least 8, maybe 10 seats in the House. Whether they get the 19 they need to take control of the House, we don't think that's going to be decided now until the races out on the West Coast are done.
And perhaps if it's really close, even not then, because there's a complex situation in Texas in which some House races aren't going to be decided until December. Paul is on covering the governor's races. Any new results?
Yes, out west, a very good night for the incumbents. Starting off in Montana, the Republican incumbent Mark Roscoe wins. Some rate him one of the most popular governors in the nation. In Utah, Republican incumbent Mike Leavitt wins. He was so popular that Democrats had a hard time fielding a candidate to run against him. In North Dakota, Republican incumbent Ed Schaefer wins due to a very strong farm economy out there. Also in the West, a lot of attention is being focused on Colorado, where voters there considered the Parental Rights Amendment, which according to CBS News estimates has lost. This would have granted parents the exclusive right to control the discipline and the education of their children. Opponents of the amendment felt that it would make it much tougher to investigate and prosecute child abuse. Dan, this is a big blow to the Christian Coalition. They had pumped a lot of time and money in trying to get this to pass. If it had passed in Colorado, it probably would have given them momentum to try to get this on the ballots in other states. That did not happen tonight.
Thanks, Paula. Keeping in mind the polls are still open in California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah, to say nothing of Arizona, also in North Dakota. The polls are still open in Wisconsin. They're open in a number of places around the country, and where they're open, we encourage you to vote. Your vote is important. Let's just take one example. In California, a referenda on whether affirmative action will remain a policy, part of a government effort. That hangs in the balance of the California vote. There's a lot still out there and a lot still for us to cover, including Rita Braver, who's in Little Rock, where President Clinton and those around him are celebrating. But Rita, they're also looking to see whether he gets over 50% of the total national vote.
That is absolutely right. And of course, in that will tell us whether or not the president is going to be able to carry out some of the things he wants to do in the next term. We were talking about the fact that Newt Gingrich has been reelected. That is another thing that the White House is carefully watching. They want to know whether Newt Gingrich is going to be the Speaker of the House again, because they think that if he does get that job, life will be so much rougher for them. They believe that he will lead a host of investigations into things that we already know about and anything he can find coming up in the future. And frankly, they are quite worried about it. Now, a lot of people have been asking when the president will come down and address this huge crowd that's been gathered. Well, he's waiting for all of the polls to close. He is also waiting for a call from Bob Dole. And we're told that the White House has been having a little bit of trouble setting that up. That might be an omen of how difficult the Republicans do intend to make it for Mr. Clinton when he wins. Dan.
Rita Braver, thanks. In our CBS News coverage of President Clinton being reelected and the Republicans holding on to control of the Senate, the House swinging the balance, will continue in a moment. The re-election of President Bill Clinton is as secure as a double knot tied with wet rawhide, and here's why. Let's go to our map. In the presidential race, 270 electoral votes needed to win. President Clinton is assured of having at least 291. This is the way the electoral vote looks. Now let me show you what the popular vote looks like. With the popular vote, this is with 40% of precincts all over the country reporting These are the rough figures. You can see why the Clinton people in Little Rock are saying, oh boy, just give us a little bit over 50%, because then that would wipe away the fact that we were a minority president the last time. He won a plurality of the votes but didn't win a majority. They won a majority. They want to get over that 50%. Bob Dole's people are saying, boy, just let us finish better than 40%, at least better than 40%, because George Bush was below 40%. Ross Perot and his people are saying, get us up there in double digits. All of that is still out there to be decided, primarily by votes on the West Coast. The Republicans are assured of keeping control of the United States Senate. We'll show you quickly what the map looks like. With 34 seats open tonight, the Republicans have won 16, the Democrats 10, but we can say with authority the Republicans will control the next Senate. They already nailed down 50 states, and with Alaska considered an absolute shoe-in for Ted Stevens, they will control the Senate, and Trent Lott will continue to be the majority leader if he's elected by the Senate at the time when Congress reconvenes this next time. Now, Ed Bradley, very quickly, a lot of talk about a landslide. When the Bush people won by 6 to 8 points, they called it a landslide in 1988. Put that in context for us for this election.
Well, I think in this area of smaller government, maybe we have diminished expectations of what a landslide is. I mean, he's 50%, they're talking about a majority, and if they want to call that a landslide, keep in mind that going back to 1964, everyone says that was a landslide when LBJ beat Barry Goldwater by 22 points. In 1972, Richard Nixon defeated Senator McGovern by 23 points. In 80, Reagan beat Carter by 10 points. He beat Mondale 4 years later by 18 points. So I don't think if you look at a historical perspective, you're going to say that 10 points is a landslide.
I want to show a couple of very close races. In the Senate race in Louisiana, keep in mind that a Democratic woman is trying to become the first woman ever sent to the United States Senate from Louisiana. And this is the way things look at this moment. She is trailing. This is with 66% of the precincts reporting. Now, we don't have enough information to say who's ever going to win this race. We simply can't say it's very close. Mississippi has just dropped for Bob Dole, 7 electoral votes in the Magnolia State. Not a surprising outcome. However, it took quite a while to get all the votes in, and it looks like the percentage is going to be something along this line. Bob Dole with a closer margin of victory in Mississippi, possibly, than many people would have expected. Keep in mind that Mississippi has returned Thad Cochran, the second of its Republican senators, Trent Lott being one. Thad Cochran is going to be returned. So Bob Dole carries Mississippi. Now, among the things that we want to do is put all of this in some kind of perspective for you. I believe now that we should go to Harry Smith on the cyber set. Harry, you got anything for us there?
We surely do, Dan. We are here to answer the musical question, whatever happened to Ross Perot, from out here in the cyber set right now. And the best way we can do that is a great illustration that comes from our maps. Let's take a look at the map from 4 years ago. The states that are in yellow are states where Ross Perot got 20% or more of the vote 4 years ago. Remember, he got 19% of the popular vote. Take a look at this same map 4 years later. We asked the question, show us the states where Ross Perot got 20% or more of the vote tonight. There are none. Zero, nada, zippa. Zippo does not compute. Now, for Ross Perot, the good news is 4 years ago he spent his own money to run for president. This time around, he spent the taxpayers' money, but of course he doesn't have much to show for it. Dan?
Thanks, Harry. All right, let's go to our consultant, our analyst, Kevin Phillips. But, Kevin, this does not mean that Ross Perot and his Reform Party are finished, not by a long shot. Where does Perot go from here?
I think what Perot will try to do is zero in on the campaign finance and lobbyist issue and try to play the same role on that he played with the budget deficit. And that'll help the Reform Party, too. I would think he'll try to knit his party together with those issues, and they're going to be a big thing in Washington, so maybe he can ride them.
And let's talk for just a second, Kevin, about the promise, the pitfalls, and the perils of a second term for President Bill Clinton. We're going to talk about this as the evening goes along, but just hit the high points for me.
Well, I think he's got a number of difficulties. The first is hubris. Presidents who've come back in for second terms with any decent margin usually sort of think they're on top of the world. He's got the legal problems. He's got a Republican Congress. He's got a probable business cycle downturn coming up in the next year or two. I think as far as reelected presidents go, he's got a lot of things to watch out for.
And Ross Perot is speaking right now in Dallas. Let's pick it up.
For accomplishing an incredible mission. You created a party in all 50 states in less than a year. Everybody said it couldn't be done, and you did it. So congratulations. I want to thank the millions of people across this country that did it. Nobody does it better. In California, it takes 2 years to create a party. They did it in just 18 days, and that shocked the system. And believe me, the system needs some shocks. I want to thank the staff that's worked tirelessly on this for doing an incredible job. And I particularly would like to thank Pat and Kay Choate, who are right here with us tonight. Pat has done a fantastic job. We had an incredibly talented team that put all those television shows together. They haven't slept. If they're here tonight, and I know they're here, they're probably standing up asleep tonight, making up for lost time, because they've been going night and day. Thank you, Tom and Mike and Bill, and thank the great crew from AMS. You are terrific.
Well, Ross Perot saying thank you. Here's the good news for Ross Perot. This is the popular vote showing Ross Perot with roughly 8%. He'd like to get into double digits, and he could before the night is over. Keep in mind the polls are still open on the West Coast and in Hawaii and Alaska. The bad news for him is this: on the electoral vote side, Ross Perot has 0 electoral votes and not likely to get any. Our CBS News coverage will continue in a moment, so stay here with us.
For the latest in-depth election results, log on to CBS News on the web at www.cbsnews.com.
Well, in their negativity and high-tech special effects, many Campaign 96 commercials have been right on the cutting edge, emphasis on cutting and burning. But some of the most effective political ads are blasts from the past. 60 Minutes correspondent Mike Wallace is here now to play some of the golden oldies of campaign commercialdom. Mike?
Dan, too many of the ads we've seen this year, I think you'll agree, have not been very interesting nor very persuasive, and certainly not funny. So we went back to the video archives to look at some commercials from campaigns past. Seems to me they used to do it better. First one, from 1984, was paid for by challenger Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, who said that his opponent was AWOL all the time.
My job was to find Dee Huddleston and get him back to work. Huddleston was missing big votes on Social Security, the budget, defense.
This was one of the funniest political commercials I've ever seen. 12 years ago, the Senate race from Kentucky. Incumbent Dee Huddleston was absent so often, and Republican Mitch McConnell said it was time to make a change.
Puerto Rico. Dee Huddleston, thank you very much. Come on. We can't find Dee. Maybe we ought to let him make speeches and switch to Mitch for senator.
1, 2, 3.
This ad was a classic, devastating in its simplicity.
7, 6.
1964, the height of the Cold War, and Lyndon Johnson's campaign was trying to scare the country into believing that Barry Goldwater was trigger happy.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd.
This ad began with a chuckle, but what it said wasn't so funny back in 1968. This is one of the meanest attack ads I can remember. The Humphrey campaign skewering Spiro Agnew. This would be funny if it weren't so serious. In another ad that same year, Hubert Humphrey's campaign didn't need to say a word. Humphrey, because he cares.
How sweet it was, Dan.
Mike, thanks. Very instructive look back. Let's go now to the Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott. Thanks for being with us, Senator. Congratulations on retaining control of the Senate. I understand that Senator Dole has called President Clinton.
I did have an opportunity to talk to Senator Dole in the last few minutes, and you know, he feels good about the campaign he ran. He did a great job, and he feels like by closing the margin, he helped us retain control of the Congress, and he thought that was very important, and obviously the American people did too. I understand, although I have not you know, had it confirmed to me directly, that he has spoken to President Clinton.
Let's talk about the country, Senator Lott, something I know you feel deeply about. What's the top issue that you and President Clinton can and will work on together in the new government?
Well, I think clearly the people voted in a way that indicates they want us to work together, and they want us to continue doing what we were doing at the latter part of the session this year. We kept our word. We passed welfare reform and illegal immigration reform, other good bills, and I think they expect us to continue to do that. Bill Clinton said he was for less government and less taxes. He talked like a Republican, and if he means that sincerely, we can work together on continuing to work to reduce the deficit and balance the federal budget. I think we can come to an agreement on some taxes that would be good for the economy and help with economic growth. I think that's very important, and make the tax code fairer. Hopefully we can work together on some regulatory relief and things like juvenile justice and drug problems. So there's a whole raft of areas where something needs to be done for the good of the country, and we will try to work with the president in trying to accomplish that.
True or false that part of the Republican agenda is now to try to paralyze the White House with so-called ethics inquiries?
False. We're going to work on the people's agenda. People expect us to work together to produce results for the future of our country and for our children. That's what it's all about. I assume there's going to be an independent counsel. We will have to have some occasion to fulfill our responsibility, to have some hearings, to look at what happened. I mean, there appears to be a lot of abuses and corruption in the campaigns. We need to take a look at that and see what happened and see what we need to do. But our emphasis is going to be on doing what needs to be done for this country. And then in regular order, we will fulfill our responsibility. But we want to put the bitterness of the campaign behind us as much as we can and work together for the future. And I think that people, they have said to us in the Congress, we liked what we saw you doing. We expect you to work with the President of the United States. If he will work with us, if he will do what he talked about in the campaign, we can do some business.
Senator Lott, I hope you stick with us. We want to continue this conversation. Right. We need to take a break. Right. Some of our CBS stations will be leaving us now. We're speaking with Senator Trent Lott of Mississippi, who has been the Senate Majority Leader and expects to continue to be the Senate Majority Leader, although the new Senate will have to vote on that. Senator Lott, I talked to one Republican and one Democrat tonight, both of them whom are in the Congress, and they both said the same thing, which is basically, Dan, if you believe there's going to be real, meaningful, significant campaign finance reform in the new Congress, you will believe rocks grow. True or false?
It's hard to tell. I don't think we ought to jump to conclusions on that even more than we should jump to conclusions on what happened with these campaign violations that have been talked about. I think we need to see what happened. I think we should have some hearings and talk about what we can do in terms of campaign reform. Is the primary system working the way it should? Do we really need national conventions? How can we deal with the cost of the campaigns? I don't think we have all the answers yet. The Democrats have always said, well, what we ought to do is just use public financing with campaigns, which we call food stamps for politicians, or let's mandate that the electronic media has to provide coverage. You know, we don't think the government answer is the solution. We think maybe there's some broader answers that we should look for.
You know,
we'll have some hearings on it.
You know that Ross Perot, among others, is going to say, there they are, Dan, it's Trent Lott and it's President Clinton. They don't want to tell you that they will pass campaign reform, not meaningful reform, because they aren't going to do it.
Well, I think we may, but I think we ought to be careful how we do it, make sure we do it right. I don't think we ought to just jump in there and say, oh, we're going to fix the problem with illegal contributions, which we should do, or address the problem of the confiscation of union dues to spend millions of dollars on misleading ads. I think we need to think about it and see if we can do it in a bipartisan way. Look, earlier this year there were people who said, look, there will never be health insurance reform. There will never be welfare reform that the president would sign, and that we wouldn't pass, you know, safe drinking water legislation. We did all of that. Hey, let's wait and see. I think my job, if I am reelected as majority leader, is to look seriously at some of the problems that we have learned about in the campaign. We have listened to the American people, and now we ought to move forward to see what we can, in fact, agree to do. Don't write us off. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have thought we could have retained the majority in the Senate and in the Congress. We did. Now, give us a chance to see if we can't do the people's business in the weeks ahead.
Senator Trent Lott, thank you for being with us. Congratulations, retaining control of the United States Senate. We'll see you along the trail. Now, back here at CBS News election headquarters in New York, the electoral vote count for Bill Clinton is now 291, 126 for Bob Dole. The polls are still open in states such as California, Oregon, Washington, out in Hawaii, up in Alaska. So there's a lot to be decided. We'll be getting some information at the top of the hour on those. In the meantime, let's turn Ed Bradley. So far on the map, what you see is that President Clinton has been strong in every area except the South and what I would call the Southwest and lower Midwest and some of the mountain states. In every other area, he's been pretty strong.
He has, except for that belt right up starting through Texas and Oklahoma up in there. He's had a very solid campaign in every part of the country. He picked off Florida, which was one of the cornerstones of their strategy in their effort to try to get this mandate. He did very well in the Northeast and in the Midwest, where there was a feeling that Bob Dole had to win states like Ohio. He had to do well in Illinois, and it just never happened. I mean, you take a look at the colors in that map, and you can see that band of blue that goes through there. That is Bill Clinton territory, and that's why he won the election.
Well, now let's pause for a moment to look at all of the results to date. We aren't going to talk, we're just going to let them roll, and here they are. It's 11 p.m. in the East. Headlines of the hour: westward ho, poll closings now in the West as President Clinton hits 50% of the popular vote. Republicans keep the Senate and still waiting on who will control the House of Representatives. This is the way the Electoral College map looks at this moment. President Clinton, 367 electoral votes, 270 was what needed to win. Bob Dole with 129 electoral votes. With 11 p.m. poll closings, this is what we can report. California, the big burrito goes to Bill Clinton, 54 electoral votes, widely expected, and that's the way it turns out. Up in Washington State, 11 electoral votes. It voted Democratic in 1992, does so again this time. And in Oregon, 7 electoral votes. It voted Democratic in 1992 and does again this time. President Clinton with a sweep on the Pacific Coast. California, Oregon, and Washington all go to him. Out in Hawaii, 4 electoral votes in the Aloha State. Bill Clinton wins it over Bob Dole there. Up in North Dakota, that is Dole country. 3 electoral votes for the man from Kansas. He carries North Dakota. Now, given that situation, here's what the map looks like at this hour. 367. Clinton has electoral votes, 270 needed to win, 129 for Dole. If you're saying, well, and also President Clinton is right at the 50% margin. He's going to get about 50% of the popular vote. Does that mean a landslide? We'll be discussing that a little later on. Right now, you are watching Election Night coverage on CBS. You got anything? No. Well, joining us now from Little Rock, the President Clinton's Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta, who is from California, and thanks for being with us, Mr. Panetta. Before we get underway with the question, let me point out that I just asked someone here, do we have any information on other races in California, Oregon, and Washington? And the answer was no, but we can say that President Clinton, Vice President Al Gore, and you and the others have made a sweep of the Pacific states, getting Washington, Oregon, and California. Tell us what the president is doing, what he feels, how he feels, what he said.
Well, the president obviously feels great about what's happening tonight, mainly because it confirms the message he's brought to the American people about the future. I think the reason he won tonight big was he was talking about hope and the future and about what's important to American families. And Bob Dole never quite got to that kind of message, and that was the contrast, and I think that was the margin of victory.
Given the fact, and it is the fact, that Republicans will retain control of the Senate, the president's coattails don't look very long. Why is that?
Well, I guess obviously we'll have to see what the final results bring this evening. But as always, when it comes to races at the Senate and at the congressional level, those are races in which local constituents pay attention to the candidates there. I've never been a big believer that the president carries a lot of coattails. I ran in my home district in California when Ronald Reagan carried my district big in '84, and I won big. So I think presidential coattails, when it comes to those races, everybody talks about that, but I don't think it's true. The American people make decisions based on the people that they want to vote for, and they can be Democrats or Republicans at that level.
Is there any way the president can prevent being hogtied by various Republican investigations in his second term?
Well, Dan, I listened to Trent Lawton, and I was glad to see that he said we want to focus on the issues that are important to the American people. And that's what the American people sent a clear message tonight on. For 4 years, the Republicans have raised allegations against the president. They've never proven anything. They've used those attacks during this campaign. The American people rejected those attacks. They didn't want insults. They wanted issues. And so what the American people said tonight is stop the partisanship, stop the gridlock, stop the attacks, focus on the issues that affect American families, their education of their kids, their jobs, their families in terms of health care, crime. Those are the issues that American people care about, and those are the issues that won tonight.
I hear the victory music in the background. I see that victory smile on your face. You've earned it. What I hear is that you're going to give up being chief of staff at the White House, go back to California, go in business for a while, and then run for governor. True?
Well, tonight we're celebrating this victory. President's made no decisions. I haven't made any decisions. Tonight is a night to celebrate the president's victory.
And so you won't argue if I say your answer was maybe. Thank you very much, Leon Panetti, Chief of White House Staff. Congratulations. Let's go to our presidential desk and Ed Bradley.
I think he'll be...
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. 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 Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much. Let me say that I've talked to President Clinton. We had a good visit, and I congratulated him. And I've said, wait a minute. Now, I've said repeatedly, I've said repeatedly in this campaign that the president is my opponent, not my enemy, and I wish him well, and I pledge my support in whatever advances the cause of a better America, because that's what the race was about in the first place, a better America as we go into the next century. And I'm very proud also of my teammate, Jack Kemp. I've talked to Jack, and I've thanked Jack
As you can see, we've split the screen here because we've got Bob Dole on the left-hand side of your screen and Rudy Boschwitz with Jim Ramstad making his way to the podium here at the Republican headquarters here at in Minneapolis at the Radisson. And we're going to listen a little bit more to Bob Dole until Mr. Boschwitz begins to speak, and then we'll switch to Mr. Boschwitz.
In fact, they've both been with me in this 96-hour marathon, and we had a great time. We had great crowds and a lot of enthusiasm. At 3 o'clock this morning, I guess it was, we're in Independence, Missouri, and I never saw so many people in one place, so excited about the Republican Party. And let me say a special word. Let me say a special word to all the young Americans and the young people who were involved in my campaign. You've been a constant source of inspiration for Elizabeth and myself. But I might add, you're not going to get that tax cut if you don't be quiet. Yeah. And I would say to the young people and all the others involved, it's a lot more fun winning. It hurts to lose an election, but stay involved and keep fighting the good fight, because
most strategically tonight, Bob Dole telling his supporters in this Washington hotel ballroom, quote, we're going to keep the Senate, quote, we're going to keep the House of Representatives. And aside from who would win this election, President Clinton having won it tonight, the important thing is who controls the House. And at 11:29, CNN is now declaring that Republicans will contain control of the 105th Congress.
We predict that the Democrats will pick up about 11 seats, give or take something, some or more, and which puts them closer to parity, but still not enough to win back the majority. Let's go back to Bob Dole in Washington.
We had many friends in the media, and they were there every day, every night, every day, and every night as we flew around this country. And we met hundreds and thousands of good people all across America who want a better America and will continue to working for a better America. And as I look around tonight and I came in, I saw a lot of very special people who've been helping me for the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And I say thank you for all you've done, because I know your support because I know that because of your support, I am still the most optimistic man in America. And I know that thousands of you have worked day and night. Thousands of you have worked day and night, and millions of you trusted Jack Kemp and me with your vote, and for that, we will always be grateful, and I say thank you very much.
Dole.
Now that we've declared everything, are we going to have a moment to, well, whenever we come out?
Haley, you've done an outstanding job. We appreciate it very much. And we've had our co-chairman flying around with us. You've done a great job. We appreciated your being with us. Thank you. And I want to say to my campaign staff, to Scott and to Jill and to Joanne and everyone else, I could not have had a better, more faithful, more loyal team. And I want to thank everybody that will have an opportunity to do that in the future. It's been a long time since I entered politics, way back in 1951. And a lot of things have happened since that time, but some things never change. A few days after I took my seat in the state legislature, a reporter asked me what I had on my agenda. And I said, well, I'm going to sit back and watch for a few days, and then I'll stand up for what I think is right. And any of you wondering what my plans may be in the future, I'm going to sit back for a few days, then I'm going to start standing up for what I think is right for America and right for you.
Bob Dole serving notice that he's not going to go away and disappear, not by a long shot, also saying, I'm still the most optimistic man in America.
That's right, Bernie. He is not talking like someone who's going to go away quietly.
All those who may be watching
35, 36 years in Washington. Speculation that perhaps President Clinton might make him a co-chairman of a commission to examine the growth of entitlements, the reining in of the growth of entitlements, Social Security and Medicare.
As Republicans,
this is a very bittersweet night, of course, for the Republicans. They did not want to lose control of the House and the Senate. They have not apparently lost control of the House or the Senate, but they did lose the White House. And this man was the embodiment of that dream for them in 1996. It was not to be. It was Bob Dole's third try. He has been in Washington since 1960. He has been in politics, as he said, since 1951. Tomorrow will be the first day, as he said at the beginning tonight. He said, the first day in my life when I don't have anything to do. Let's listen again.
With a full heart and a fervent prayer that we will meet again and we will meet often. In this land where miracles are always happening, where every day is a new beginning and every life a blessing from God. So I want to say thanks to each one of you here. Thank you for all you've done and all you will do in the future for America. Thank you very much, and God bless America.
Bob Dole in this Washington hotel room, surrounded by family and friends, listening to Bob Dole in Dallas, Texas, the presidential candidate for the Reform Party, Ross Perot. Mr. Perot, welcome to our live coverage.
Good evening.
Good evening. What is going through your mind? What did you accomplish in this run?
I certainly think we've got them all committed to campaign finance reform. They're talking the right words now. They're making the right commitments. We will have to stay at the gate and be vigilant to make sure that they make the changes in campaign finance form, come through with a balanced budget amendment, a plan to balance the budget, and work out all the steps necessary to pass on a better, stronger country to our children, because that's what drives everybody.
Yep, it'll be moving over, spreading the area during the remainder of the night, and it will be in our area tomorrow morning and ending very late in the day.
All right, and also Friday Sports Extra one night early.
Moving up early this week, that's right. It'll be Thursday night instead of Friday. We've got a lot of local volleyball playoff action and some other stuff in store as well.
All right, and obviously we will continue to get election updates, and we will have all the latest for you tomorrow on our noonday edition with Kurt Crandall. Thanks for watching tonight.
Breaking news, dial 625 News or star 12 from your cellular 2000 phone. This free call will connect you to the cellular 2000 News 12 tip line, free, courtesy of cellular 2000.
The Democratic Senate seat in Montana. Now, this is a tough one. You'll recall that earlier in the evening, everybody who announces winners when we believe we know it, believed that Dick Sweat, a former two-term U.S. representative in New Hampshire, had won the Senate race in New Hampshire and picked up a seat for the Democrats. That was wrong. We were in error. As it turns out, Bob Smith, the Republican senator in New Hampshire, looking for his second term, came from way back, nipped Sweat at the absolute wire. Well, let me tell you, this race was so close for most of the evening that it was too close to call, fax, or email. But now we feel we can say conclusively, Sweat did not win that race. The Republicans held on, and Bob Smith will be returned to the United States Senate. Now, in South Dakota, in the presidential race, the 3 electoral votes we've said earlier would go to Bob Dole. However, in the South Dakota Senate race, Bob Schieffer, check me along here, in the South Dakota Senate race, Pressler loses that race.
I don't think we've called that race.
Don't think we've called that. That's what I'm asking.
No, we have not called that race
All right.
yet.
It's very, very close, so let's take a look at that. Let's go out west and take a look at that South Dakota race. Indeed, we have not. Senate race in South Dakota. This is how it looks. Larry Pressler is trailing Tim Johnson, but I want to underscore that this race has not reached the point where we believe we can say either candidate has won it. If Tim Johnson continues to lead the incumbent Larry Pressler, that would be a pickup for the Democrats. But let's pause for a moment and italicize. The Republicans are going to control the next Senate. They'll also control the House. Of course, President Clinton has been reelected. And our CBS News coverage here on Election Night 1996 will continue in just a moment, so stay with us.
This portion of CBS News Election Night coverage is sponsored by Buick and your local dealers. Remember Buick, the new symbol for quality in America. And by Merrill Lynch. For our clients, the difference is planning. The difference is Merrill Lynch. And by new Accid AR, proven so effective it can prevent heartburn completely.
Back at CBS News election headquarters in New York, there's still a number of states in which the presidential election has not yet been decided. Some of these races in some of these states have been hotter than a Presidio parking lot for hours now. Just take a look at our map. President Clinton is assured of having at least 367 electoral votes, but among the states where the presidential race has not been decided, down in Georgia, let's take a look at what it may look like in Georgia in the presidential race. Really close with Dole leading. Then also undecided, Montana is still out, Arizona is still out, Nevada is still out, and Colorado is still out in the presidential race. Now, races not decided for the Senate, Oregon, Colorado, and South Dakota are the races where it has not been decided who's going to the Senate. The polls have not yet closed in all of Alaska. Bob Huber, let's talk about the shape of the new Congress. We know it's going to be Republican. Let's talk about how it forms up.
All right. Again, I have one of my little seating charts here, Dan. I feel like I'm planning a dinner party here. But here is the seating chart that we have for the House. Remember, we start out the night with the Republicans having 236 seats in the current House. Democrats had 198. All of those seats, of course, were being contested tonight. Now, at this point in the evening, we see the Republicans with 186 seats. We see the Democrats have won 164. We still show on this chart 83 contests to be decided. But we do believe that when the night is over and when all those races on the West Coast come in, that the Republicans will retain their majority in the House, but it's going to be a smaller majority. And remember, Democrats needed only 19 seats to take the majority back. It's going to be an even smaller majority. So you had a raucous House these last 2 years. It'll be just as raucous in the next two. There are a lot of human interest stories, Dan. I would just mention one. Long Island Congressman Dan Friesa, who was a Republican. He voted against the assault weapons ban. He was defeated tonight by Carolyn McCarthy. She is a Democrat. She was what people used to call a housewife. She'd never been involved in politics. But her husband was killed in that Long Island Railroad massacre 2 or 3 years ago by the gunman, that inexplicable incident that happened. She became so enraged she decided to run for Congress. She ran against Dan Friesa and she beat him.
And a young person won tonight. Democrat Harold Ford Jr. will succeed his father as congressman from Memphis, Tennessee. He will be the youngest member of the United States Congress. He is, get this, 26 years old. Our CBS News coverage will continue after these messages. President Clinton wins by a solid margin, wins a second term. The economy again helped him tremendously. He did well almost everywhere except the South and in some of the Western Plains areas. Ed Bradley, divided government, Republicans going to control the House in the second Clinton administration. What does this mean for the president?
Well, Dan, you know, I was struck by something that Bob Dole said. He said that for the first time in his life, tomorrow he will have absolutely nothing to do. Think of Bill Clinton, 50 years old. He's just been re-elected president of the United States. As they say in the sports world, he has to be at the top of his game. And he's going to have to be at the top of his game to work with this Republican Congress. And that's what he has an opportunity to do for both sides, both branches of government, to come together and work in the common interests of all of us who live in this country. You know, you look at what we talked to people in the state of Washington, looking at what Bill Clinton wants to do and trying to figure out how people feel about it. And if you look at the numbers there, you find that 29% of the people support almost all of what he wants to do, 33% support some of it. So most of the people support what he wants to do. You come back to Bob Dole's message of cutting taxes and reducing the deficit. People want that to be done in this country. They just didn't think Bob Dole had the opportunity or could do it. Now, Bill Clinton, with a Republican Congress, has an opportunity to cut taxes and to reduce the deficit.
If he chooses to do that. Harry Smith, seeing you on that cyber set as we have all night long, I guess it's time to tell people your middle name is actually Spock. As we do that, tell us what the voters have said today they think about a Republican-controlled Congress again.
Well, Dan, they've told Bill Clinton they want him to live long and prosper and go back to the White House, right? But with reservations, and there's sobering news for the Republican Congress as well. This is exit poll stuff. Once again, 60,000 voters. Republican Congress over the last couple of years, what kind of a job did they do? Over 53% said they disapproved. This is a little bit of a complicated message. What do they think about the Speaker of the House's performance over the last couple of years? Now, this is nationwide now. You've got, 60% of the people said they don't like Newt Gingrich very much. So while all these folks are sending Bill Clinton back to the White House and the Republicans back to control of Congress, none of these folks seem to be particularly crazy about any of them.
Going to take a break. Our CBS News coverage continues in just a moment, so stay in here with us.
Today we're hearing "Hail to the Chief." It has, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, that red carpet and that blue carpet and that seal looks a little bit like the White House.
Well, he wasn't president in 1992. He had a couple of months to go.
Yes,
before
you can't play "Hail to the Chief" when you've just won and haven't been inaugurated yet. Here's Al Gore. I guess he's going to do the introductions.
No Macarena tonight.
Well.
Maybe Macarena. We'll see.
I'll tell you one thing that might be going up through his mind. This moment tonight, right now at this podium, he could be thinking this makes up for all those funerals I had to attend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. Before I present the President, I would like to thank the people who made this glorious evening possible. My wife, Tipper, who has campaigned from one end of the country and back again with flair and passion. My 4 children, Corinna, Kristen, Sarah, and Albert, who have filled our lives with love and our hearts with pride. I would like to thank my parents who have set a standard of excellence and integrity in public service that has always inspired me. My brother-in-law, Frank Hunger, a wise and trusted friend. On behalf of the President and myself, I'd like to thank Peter Knight, the best campaign manager ever, and a campaign staff that worked harder and more effectively than any in history. And on a personal note, I would like to thank the people of my home state of Tennessee for giving us a victory this evening. And may I say, on behalf of Tipper and myself, to a very dear friend, and on behalf of millions of families in villages throughout our land, a very special thank you to a woman who has faced extraordinary pressures with grace, dignity, and an unbreakable commitment to serving our nation, America's First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton. A few blocks from here, in the summer of 1992, then Governor Bill Clinton asked me to be his running mate. It has been my great privilege to work by his side these past 4 years, and I want you to know I have gotten to know him as very few
News live coverage of election night. Vice President Gore speaking from the old State House in Arkansas.
However towering the obstacles, however long the odds, that takes strength, that takes vision, that takes leadership, that takes character. The Bible says, by their fruits ye shall know them. On this night 4 years ago, on this very spot, I said we felt good having won an election, but even better at having been granted the chance to change a country. Much has changed since we last gathered here, and it has changed because of the resolve and determination of the American people under Bill Clinton's leadership. Under President Bill Clinton, we have forged a new prosperity, putting our financial house in order while restarting the great American jobs machine. We have deepened our ethic of environmental stewardship and redoubled our commitment to protecting God's creation. We have secured our place in the world by helping to bring peace and reconciliation to lands scarred by hatred's savage hand, and by speeding the spread of democracy and free markets across the globe. We have moved to redeem the promise of representative democracy by reinventing the processes of self-government to make them work better and cost less. And we have begun the task of restoring faith and responsibility to the American community by keeping our streets safe and our values secure. Under Bill Clinton, the United States of America is not just better off, it's better. Now, 4 years later, we again celebrate a victory. But what we savor much more is the opportunity you have given us once again to lift our country higher still. And from where we stand tonight, we can now see the shimmering rays of light that signal the dawn of the 21st century. We see an America that is preparing and empowering all of its people and giving them opportunities to succeed. We see an America in which success does not depend on how others categorize you, but upon what is in your heart. An America in which talented teachers shepherd dedicated students through the best schools in the entire world, where an 8-year-old can pick up a book and read it on his or her own. An America in which higher education is open to all and affordable by all. From our vantage point tonight, we see an America where every child can connect to the information superhighway and absorb the vast knowledge of a small planet. An America where any person with a good idea and the desire to work can enter the new networked economy and become tomorrow's successful entrepreneur. An America where the greatest scientists in the world continue to make discoveries that change our lives for the better. We see an America where the water is safe and the air is clean, whose national parks continue to thrive and delight our families, whose toxic waste sites are cleaned up, and whose urban brownfields become alive again and green with promise for all our people. From where we stand tonight, we see an America making a transition to a new era, aware of the uncertainties but inspired by the possibilities. We are beginning to see an America scrubbing the stain of cynicism from our national fabric reinvigorating the civic institutions on which our national health depends. An America motivated not by what divides us, but by what makes us one. And that is why we also see an America where a president of one party and a Congress of another can work together to serve citizens of every party. Let me say a special word to America's young people tonight. This is your nation, too. Your claim on it is just as great as those who are older. Please involve yourselves in our democratic process. Add your voices and your talents to our grand experiment in self-government. Ladies and gentlemen, in only a few hours it will be morning, and across America, from the Shenandoah Valley to Silicon Valley, from Brighton Beach in New York to Oak Street Beach in Chicago, from Tampa Bay to Puget Sound, from the Oval Office in the White House to the kitchen table in your house, the sun will rise on another day in America, another step forward on our national journey. And leading us in that journey will be the man from hope who tonight becomes a man for history. Prior to this election, in the entire history of our nation, from the presidency of George Washington forward, only 13 people have been elected to 2 straight terms as President of the United States of America. 6 of them have been Democrats, one of history's short list. But tonight, to the names of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we add a 7th name, the name of your president, my friend, President William Jefferson Clinton.
My fellow Americans, thank you for being here. Just 4 years from now, we will enter a new century of great challenge and unlimited possibility. Now, we've got a bridge to build, and I'm ready if you are. Today, the American people have spoken. They have affirmed our course. They have told us to go forward. America has told every one of us, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, loud and clear, it is time to put politics aside, join together, and get the job done for America's future. In the last 4 years, we've made remarkable progress. But in our schools, our families, our workplaces, and our communities, our journey is not done. My fellow Americans, we have work to do, and that's what this election was all about. I want to say to all of you here and to all of the American people, no words can convey the gratitude I feel tonight for the honor that has been given to me. It is an honor that belongs to many. First, to my family, to my wonderful wife of 21 years, who from the day I first met her began teaching me that it does take a village to raise our children and build our future. To our daughter Chelsea for understanding the work we have done together the burdens it has imposed. Today, I went down to the train station to vote in the last election in which I will appear on the ballot. And as I have done in every year since she was born, I took Chelsea to the ballot with me. And as we looked at the ballot together and discussed the issues there, I thank God that I was born an American. I thank the members of my wonderful family who are here, my stepfather Dick Kelly, my wonderful mother-in-law Dorothy Rodham, and all the others. And I thank my beloved mother who is smiling up there and said, I never had a doubt. I always knew it would be this way. I thank the friends of my lifetime. There are people who have stood with me through thick and thin, who started with me in grade school and junior and senior high school, in college and all across the years since. Friends who knew me and knew my dreams and stood as a powerful force against those who sought to stop America's progress with the politics of personal destruction. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for what you did for America. I thank the people of my beloved native state. I would not be anywhere else in the world tonight. In front of this wonderful old Capitol that has seen so much of my own life and our state's history, I thank you for staying with me so long, for never giving up, for always knowing that we could do better. I thank the finest vice president this country has ever seen. Because of Al Gore, we have a stronger and more secure relationship with the democratic Russia. We are exploring the wonders of new technologies for the benefit of America. We are protecting our environment, and we have reinvented America's government so that it does more with less, thanks to his leadership. It is a legacy unique in the history of this republic. I thank Tipper for her friendship, for her crusades on behalf of our children and the mental health of the American people, and for always standing with us along with her children and her family. I thank the members of our administration, the cabinet members, the members of the White House staff, I thank all those who are part of the permanent service to the President at the White House and the medical staff. I thank especially my Secret Service detail that has been so challenged by a president determined not to be isolated from the American people. I thank the members of our campaign staff, all those who have served in this election and the work you have done. I thank the leaders of our party in the Congress and the state houses. I thank all those who stood for what we believe in these elections today, those who won and those who did not. You did a service to America by raising the things in which we believe, and I thank you all and wish you Godspeed. I want to thank the employees of the nation's government. They have had to do a remarkable job. We have reduced the size of our government to its smallest point since President Kennedy served, and yet they have continued to serve the people better year in and year out. They had to do it in the face of enormous challenges and outright hatred for momentary periods. They had to live with the horror of Oklahoma City and the difficulties that came along the way. But the people who serve us deserve our thanks, and I thank them. I thank those who served this administration and our cause, who are no longer here tonight, and one especially I must thank, my friend and brother Ron Brown. You're looking down on us, and I know you're smiling too. On a purely personal note, I must thank my pastor, Rex Horn, who prayed with me before I came out here tonight, and all the ministers and people of God who prayed for me and with me over these last 4 years. There were a few especially, and they know who they are, who came to the White House time after time in good times and bad. When the times were bad, they reminded me that God gave St. Paul a thorn in his flesh so he would not become exalted in his own eyes. And that certainly was not a problem for me in the bad times. When the times were good, they reminded me that humility is always in order in the presidency, for in this life we see through a glass darkly, and we cannot know the whole truth of our circumstances or the motives of those who oppose us. I thank them all for bringing me closer to God and to the eternal wisdom without which a president cannot serve. I would like to say a special word of thanks to Senator Dole, and I ask you to join me in applause for his lifetime of service to the United States. And I thank Jack Kemp for his service to America and his devotion to the proposition that this is a country in which everyone should have a chance to live free and equal and to have a chance at success. Let me say, I had a good visit with Senator Dole not too long before he went out to speak. I thanked him for his love of our country, for his years of service. I applauded the campaign that he fought so bravely to the very last minute. I thanked him for the work we did together to advance the common cause of America, and on behalf of all Americans, I wish him well and Godspeed. 4 years ago, on these very steps, we set forth on a journey to change the course of America for the better, to keep the American dream alive for everyone willing to work for it, to keep America the world's strongest force for peace and freedom and prosperity, to come together as one American community. The time was one of widespread frustration and doubt about our economic and social problems, about our ability to deal with the vast sweep of change that was all around us. The scope and pace of those changes were threatening to many, and our values seemed to be under attack on all sides. But together, you and I vowed to turn our country around with a strategy to meet our challenges and protect our values. Opportunity for all, responsibility from all, an American community of all Americans. We have worked hard to end the politics of who's to blame, and instead to ask, what are we going to do to make America better? Tonight we proclaim that the vital American center is alive and well. It is a common ground on which we have made our progress. Today our economy is stronger, our streets are safer, our environment is cleaner, the world is more secure, and thank God our nation is more united. To all the men and women across this country who have created our jobs, taught our children, patrolled our streets, and kept America safe throughout our world, I say America's success is your success. This victory is your victory. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, my fellow Americans, a vast new century lies before us. It will be a time more full of opportunity for people to live out their dreams than any in human history. We have committed this night to continuing our journey, to doing the hard work that will build our bridge to the 21st century, to give the young people here and those all across America the America they deserve, and their children and their children's children. But we have work to do. We have work to do to keep our economy growing steady and strong by balancing the budget while we honor our duties to our families, our parents, and our children, and our duty to pass on to our children the earth God gave us. We have work to do to give all of our children the gift of an education, to make sure every 8-year-old can read, every 12-year-old can log on to the internet, and yes, every single 18-year-old in this country willing to work for it can have a college education. We have work to do to make the permanent underclass in this country a thing of the past, to lift our fellow citizens who are poor from the degradation of welfare dependency to the pride and dignity of work. We have work to do to strengthen our families, to help our parents succeed at home and at work, to keep our children safe from harm in their schools, their streets, their homes, and their communities, to clean up our environment so that our children grow up next to parks, not poison, to tell them that drugs are wrong and illegal and they can kill them, to teach them right from wrong. My fellow Americans, I will do all I can to advance these causes, but all our citizens must do their part to continue the upsurge of personal responsibility that in the last 4 years has brought crime to a 10-year low, child support collections to an all-time high, and reduced the welfare rolls. Will you help me do that? We must do it together. We must make our democracy stronger by enacting real, bipartisan campaign finance reform. Talk is no longer enough. We must act and act now, and the American people will be watching the leaders of both parties to see who is willing not just to talk, but to act. I am willing to act, and I ask others to join me. And we must keep America the world's indispensable nation, finishing the unfinished business of the Cold War, meeting the new threats to our security through terrorism and the proliferation of dangerous weapons, and seizing these extraordinary opportunities to extend our values of peace and democracy and prosperity. Every American here tonight and every American within the sound of my voice can take pride in the fact that in these last few years, for the first time in all of human history, a majority of the human beings living on this globe live under democracies where the people rule. The challenges we face, they're not Democratic or Republican challenges, they're American challenges. What we know from the budget battles of the last 2 years and from the remarkable success of the last few weeks of this Congress is the lesson we have learned for the last 220 years. What we have achieved as Americans of lasting good, we have achieved by working together. So let me say to the leaders of my Democratic Party and the leaders of the Republican Party, it is time to put country ahead of party. We do not know the final outcome of the congressional elections, but we know this: the races are close. The American people have been closely divided. The Congress, whatever happens, will be closely divided. They are sending us a message: work together, meet our challenges, put aside the politics of division, and build America's community together. On this beautiful night, when we have shared so much joy and so much music and so much laughter and so much pride, it is hard for me to believe that it was 23 years ago when I first began to go to the people of Arkansas to ask for their support. The most lasting and important thing that I have learned in all those 23 fleeting years is this: when we are divided, we defeat ourselves. But when we join our hands and build our families and our communities and our country, America always wins. What we need to do is to do the work of America the way we seek to do the work of raising our children and doing our work and supporting our religious institutions and our community institutions, if we would simply be Americans the way we seek to live in all of our other roles, there is no stopping America. Our best days are still ahead. And so, I say, when we look into our hearts and simply ask what is right for the American people and the future of our children, when we set aside our differences and build on our shared values of faith and family and work, when we roll up our sleeves and work together, America always wins. And my fellow Americans, America is going to keep winning these next 4 years. Let me say that, as all of you here from my native state know, I believe this and I have tried to live by it, because there's no person in America who has been given more gifts than I have. There is no person in America tonight who feels more humble in the face of this victory than I do. 50 years ago, when I was born in a summer storm to a widowed mother in a small town in the southwest part of our state, it was unimaginable that someone like me could have ever become president of the greatest country in human history. It has been, for me, a remarkable journey, not free of failure, but full of adventure and wonder and grace. I have worked hard to serve, but I did not get here on my own. Every step along the way, for these last 23 years and long before, there was a teacher, a doctor, a neighbor, a parent, a friend, a wife, a daughter, who always had time to care, who always tried to give me instruction and encouragement, and who never gave up. I got here tonight, my fellow Americans, because America gave me a chance. That is what all the children of America deserve. Our people have to give them the tools, to give them not a guarantee, but that real chance to live up to their God-given potential. And I ask you to join me in that commitment. Every child deserves the main chance that I was given. And so I say, again, let us resolve to run our country the way we tried to run our lives. Whether you are of the party of Thomas Jefferson or the party of Abraham Lincoln, whether you're an independent or unaffiliated, remember that we all belong to the greatest nation in history. To us, much has been given and much is still expected. We must rise to the challenge of building that bridge to the 21st century. Tonight is a night for joy, not just for us here, but for all Americans. For the 53rd time in our history, our people have made their quiet and deliberate decision. They have come together with their powerful voice and expressed their will. Tonight we celebrate the miracle of America. Tomorrow we greet the dawn and begin our work anew. I am more grateful than I can say. You have given me an opportunity and a responsibility that comes to few people. I will do my best, and together we will build that bridge to the 21st century. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
President Clinton, who now stands with 375 electoral votes, and that may or may not go up as the evening goes along, having become the first Democrat since Franklin Roosevelt to be elected to two full terms. Both his address tonight and that of Vice President Gore went on for a while. It isn't true that the president intended to thank every American who voted for him by name phonetically and alphabetically, but it may have seemed that way for a while. In Alaska, Bob Dole has carried that state's 3 electoral votes as expected. Arizona goes to President Clinton, 8 electoral votes there. First time since 1948 Arizona's voted for a Democrat. Clinton gets Arizona. Last for Senate race, Senator Ted Stevens, as expected, gets a 5th term. And in the South Dakota Senate race, Representative Tim Johnson has defeated incumbent Republican Senator Larry Pressler. Those are among the late results. Wonderful scene as the Clintons savor their victory and triumph and watch the fireworks display. Our White House correspondent, Rita Braver.
Well, Dan, you know, despite all of those fireworks, really, this was a night for gravity rather than a lot of jubilation. The president was really trying hard to reinforce this image that he has been so careful to nurture through the whole campaign, and that is that he is the person who puts the country ahead of party. You heard him reach out to Republicans to urge them to cast aside the politics of division, and I think that he is trying to get them to do that. Over and over again throughout this campaign, he talked about unity, about common ground, and tried to convince Americans that, in fact, he was the person who had the ability to cope with the country's problems. He has been absolutely enchanted with this idea of being the person to take the country